They said she was lucky. Lucky to marry a duke, lucky to escape poverty's grip, lucky to wear silk instead of rags. But Eliza Harrow knew the truth as she stood alone in the grand ballroom, watching her husband dance with another woman. This wasn't luck. It was a gilded cage, and tonight she would either break free or be crushed trying. If you want to see how a woman with nothing but her wits takes on an empire built to silence her, stay until the end. Like this video, drop your city in the comments, and let's begin. The carriage rattled over cobblestones, each jolt sending Eliza's stomach into tighter knots. Through the narrow window, she watched the countryside blur past, green fields giving way to manicured hedges, then iron gates that seemed to stretch toward heaven itself. Beyond them, Ashworth Manor rose like a monument to everything she'd never been. Powerful, untouchable, cold. "Stop fidgeting," her mother hissed from across the seat. Margaret Harrow's face was pinched, her gloved hands gripping a handkerchief that had been twisted into a damp rope. "You're about to become a duchess. Act like one." Eliza's hand stilled in her lap, though her heart continued its panicked rhythm. "Mother, Not another word." Her mother's voice dropped to a whisper, sharp as broken glass. "Your father's debts would have landed us in debtor's prison by month's end. This marriage saves us all. You will smile, you will obey, and you will not embarrass this family." The carriage turned through the gates. Eliza caught her reflection in the window glass. Pale skin, dark hair pulled back so tightly it made her temples ache, eyes that looked too large for her face. She looked like a girl playing dress-up in her mother's wedding gown, which, in a sense, she was. The ivory silk had been altered 3 times to fit her smaller frame. The lace yellowed with age despite desperate attempts to bleach it white. 23 years old, and this was her value. A solution to debts she hadn't incurred, a bargaining chip in negotiations she hadn't been invited to attend. The manor loomed larger. Eliza counted windows, too many to track. Somewhere behind one of them was the man who'd purchased her future with a stroke of his pen. Duke Nathaniel Voss. She'd seen him once at the signing. He'd barely looked at her, his attention fixed on the document spread across his solicitor's desk. Dark hair going silver at the temples, cold blue eyes that scanned contracts like a general surveying battle plans. A mouth that never smiled, only issued orders in a voice that expected immediate obedience. He was 42. She was 23. He was a duke. She was the daughter of a failed merchant. He was power incarnate. She was a debt settled. The carriage stopped. Before Eliza could gather her thoughts, the door swung open and a footman in pristine livery offered his hand. She took it because she had no choice, stepping down onto gravel that crunched beneath her worn shoes, another thing her mother had insisted would do since no one would see them beneath the dress. "Miss Harrow!" The voice came from the top of the stairs, formal and utterly devoid of warmth. "Welcome to Ashworth Manor." The butler. Had to be. He was elderly, ramrod straight, with eyes that catalogued every detail of her appearance and found it wanting. Behind him, a line of servants stood at attention, maids in black and white, footmen in crimson and gold, all of them staring at her with expressions ranging from curiosity to poorly concealed pity. They knew. Of course they knew. Servants always knew everything. "Thank you," Eliza managed, climbing the stairs on legs that felt like water. "I'm honored to—" "His Grace awaits in the study." The butler, she didn't even know his name, turned without waiting for her response. "This way." The entrance hall stole whatever breath she had left. Marble floors polished to mirror brightness. A ceiling 3 stories high, painted with scenes of angels and clouds that probably cost more than her father's entire estate. Twin staircases curving up to a landing where a portrait hung, some long-dead Voss ancestor glowering down at the world he'd conquered. Soon, there would be a portrait of her hanging somewhere in these halls. The thought made her dizzy. Mother! But her mother was already being escorted away by a stern-faced housekeeper, whisked off to prepare for the ceremony. Eliza was alone now, following the butler through corridors that seemed designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant, which, she supposed, was exactly the point. They stopped before a heavy oak door. The butler knocked twice, then opened it without waiting for an answer. "Miss Harrow, Your Grace." Eliza stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a sound like a tomb ceiling. The study was all dark wood and leather, shelves of books rising to the ceiling, a fire crackling in a hearth large enough to stand in. And behind a massive desk, barely glancing up from the papers before him, sat her future husband. Nathaniel Voss looked exactly as she remembered, cold, controlled, completely uninterested in her existence. He finished reading whatever document held his attention, signed it with precise strokes, then set down his pen, and finally, looked at her. Miss Harrow. Not a question, a statement of fact, cataloging her presence the way one might note a new piece of furniture. I trust your journey was acceptable. Yes, Your Grace. Her voice came out steadier than she'd expected. Small victory. Thank you for... The ceremony will commence at 4 o'clock. Mrs. Beatrice will show you to your chambers. A dress has been prepared, as I assume the one you're wearing is... His gaze flicked over her mother's altered gown. Unsuitable. Heat rushed to Eliza's cheeks. My mother's dress is perfectly... I'm not interested in sentiment, Miss Harrow. Only propriety. He picked up another document. A Duchess of this house will be attired appropriately. Mrs. Beatrice has selected something that meets those standards. You'll wear it. It wasn't a request. Eliza's fingernails bit into her palms. Of course, Your Grace. Good. He returned to his papers, dismissing her as thoroughly as if she'd ceased to exist. That will be all. She stood there, waiting for something. She wasn't sure what. A word of reassurance? A hint of kindness? Acknowledgement that they were about to bind their lives together? Nothing came. Miss Harrow. His voice held a note of impatience now. Was there something else? Yes, she wanted to scream. There's everything else. There's the fact that you're about to marry me without even looking me in the eye. There's the fact that I'm terrified and alone and you don't care. There's the fact that I'm a person, not a signature on a contract. No, Your Grace, she whispered. Nothing else. The ceremony was a blur of cold efficiency. The chapel attached to the manor was beautiful. Stained glass windows casting colored light across pews where a handful of witnesses sat. Her mother, weeping into her handkerchief. Nathaniel's solicitor, stone-faced and proper. A few servants, because someone had to bear witness. The dress Mrs. Beatrice had provided was exquisite. Cream silk and French lace that fit perfectly. Probably cost more than her father had earned in a year. Eliza felt like a doll being dressed for display. The vicar spoke the words, ancient words about duty and honor and until death. Nathaniel's responses came in that same flat, controlled voice he used for everything. When it was Eliza's turn to speak, her voice shook despite her best efforts. I will. 2 words that sealed her fate. Nathaniel slipped a ring onto her finger, heavy gold set with diamonds that caught the light. It was beautiful. It was also cold as ice and felt like a shackle. You may kiss the bride. Nathaniel turned to her, his face revealing nothing. For one horrible moment, Eliza thought he might refuse, might simply turn away and declare the ceremony complete without even that basic acknowledgement. Instead, he leaned in, quick, perfunctory, and pressed his lips to hers for exactly 2 seconds. No warmth, no tenderness, just obligation fulfilled. Then it was over. Congratulations, Your Grace, the vicar said to Nathaniel. Then, almost as an afterthought, and to you as well, Your Grace. It took Eliza a moment to realize he was speaking to her now. She was a duchess. Duchess Voss. The name felt foreign in her mind, belonging to someone else entirely. The wedding breakfast was worse than the ceremony. They sat at opposite ends of a table that could have seated 30, servants hovering to serve course after course of food Eliza couldn't taste. Her mother had left immediately after the ceremony, escorted away with a purse full of gold, her debt settled, her duty done. Eliza was truly alone now. Nathaniel ate in silence, occasionally responding to some comment from his solicitor about estate business. He didn't speak to her once, not to ask if she was well, not to make even the most basic attempt at conversation. She might as well have been invisible. After the meal, he stood. I have business in London. I'll return in a fortnight. Eliza blinked. You're leaving? Yes. He adjusted his cuffs, not meeting her eyes. Mrs. Beatrice will orient you to the household. If you require anything, speak to her or to Patterson. The butler, she realized. That was his name. I trust you'll find everything satisfactory. But Eliza rose from her chair, her voice rising despite herself. "It's our wedding day." That finally got his attention. Nathaniel looked at her directly for the first time since the ceremony, his blue eyes as cold as winter sky. "I'm aware, madam. However, I have obligations that cannot be postponed. You have a home now, security, everything we agreed upon. What more do you expect?" She wanted to say. "I expect my husband to at least pretend I exist." But the words died in her throat as she saw the truth in his expression. He didn't care. This was a transaction to him, nothing more. She was an acquisition, like a new horse or a piece of property. Useful, perhaps, but not worthy of his time or attention. "Nothing, Your Grace," she said quietly. "I expect nothing." Something flickered across his face. Was it relief? But it was gone before she could identify it. "Good," he nodded to Patterson. "Ensure Her Grace has everything she needs." And then he was gone, striding from the dining room without a backward glance, leaving Eliza standing alone in a house that was supposed to be her home, but felt more like a prison. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, suspended unreality. Mrs. Beatrice, the housekeeper, was efficient and cold, showing Eliza through endless corridors and rooms without ever quite meeting her eyes. The servants were worse. They performed their duties with perfect precision, but Eliza could feel their judgment, their whispers when they thought she couldn't hear. The merchant's daughter, marrying above her station. What was His Grace thinking? Probably thinking about those debts her father owed. Buying himself a wife like he'd buy a horse. She doesn't belong here. You can see it in the way she walks, the way she holds her teacup. Common blood trying to wear silk. Eliza pretended not to hear. She explored the manor, room after room of wealth and history and power that had nothing to do with her. The family portrait gallery was especially painful, generations of Vosses staring down at her with varying degrees of aristocratic disdain. Would her portrait hang here someday? Would future generations look at it and know immediately she didn't belong? The library became her refuge. At least books didn't judge. She spent hours there, reading about estate management and agricultural practices and the social intricacies of the peerage. If she was going to survive in this world, she needed to understand it. On the 13th day, she ventured into the East Wing, the servants' quarters. Mrs. A. Beatrice had made it clear this area was not suitable for Her Grace, which naturally made Eliza curious about what was being hidden. What she found made her stomach turn. The rooms were cramped and dark, windows so small they barely let in light. The servants' dining hall was drafty and cold, the food they ate a far cry from what was served upstairs. And in the scullery she found a girl, couldn't have been more than 14, scrubbing pots with hands that were raw and bleeding. "What's your name?" Eliza asked softly. The girl nearly dropped the pot in shock, scrambling to curtsy despite her obvious pain. Mary, Your Grace, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I'll work faster, I promise." "Your hands," Eliza interrupted. "They're injured." "It's nothing, Your Grace, just the lie. How long have they been like this?" Mary's eyes darted toward the door, fear evident. "A few weeks, Your Grace, but I can still work. I swear I can." "That's not what I asked." Silence. Then barely a whisper. "Mrs. Beatrice says we're meant to endure, that His Grace doesn't tolerate weakness." Eliza felt something cold settle in her chest. "I see." She found Mrs. Beatrice in her office, reviewing household accounts. "Why is Mary working with hands that are bleeding?" Eliza asked without preamble. The housekeeper looked up, her expression unchanging. "Mary is fulfilling her duties, Your Grace. Her duties are destroying her hands. The work must be done." "Then find her gloves, or change the soap, or—" "Your Grace." Mrs. Beatrice set down her pen, her tone sharp. "With all due respect, household management is my responsibility. It has been for 20 years. I run this estate according to His Grace's standards, which are very specific. The servants understand their place. They do not require—" She paused, her gaze raking over Eliza with thinly veiled contempt. Atim. Interference from those who don't understand how such households function." The dismissal was clear, the insult even clearer. Eliza held her ground. "I'm the Duchess now. This household is His Grace's household. Mrs. Beatrice interrupted coldly. "You are his wife, yes. But this manor, these servants, these traditions, they belong to him. And until he instructs me otherwise, I will continue managing as I always have. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have actual work to attend to." Eliza left the office, her face burning. She'd been put in her place, gently, politely, but unmistakably. She was the Duchess in name only. Here, in her own home, she had no power at all. That night, she sat in her chambers, the Duchess's suite, all silk and velvet and loneliness, and finally let herself cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet tears of realization sliding down her cheeks. This was her life now. A beautiful prison where she existed but didn't matter, where servants treated her with polite contempt and her husband couldn't even bother to come home. She'd thought marrying a duke meant security, safety, maybe even a chance at something more. Instead, she'd become a ghost in her own house, fading more each day into the insignificance everyone expected of her. The door to the adjacent chamber, Nathaniel's room, connected to hers, remained firmly locked. It had never opened. Not once. Outside her window, rain began to fall. Eliza watched water stream down glass and wondered if this was all there would ever be. Empty rooms, cold glances, and the slow suffocation of existing without being seen. Somewhere in London, her husband was living his real life, attending to business, meeting with associates, possibly enjoying himself. And here she sat, the purchased wife, learning the bitter truth of her situation. She'd been bought, but she hadn't been wanted, and nobody here was ever going to let her forget it. The morning Nathaniel returned, Eliza was in the library reading about crop rotation. Not because she particularly cared about agriculture, but because the alternative was staring at wallpaper and slowly losing her mind. 3 weeks of isolation had taught her that idle hands and an idle mind were dangerous companions. She heard the commotion in the entrance hall, Patterson's voice, sharp commands to footmen, the sound of trunks being hauled across marble. Her heart did something stupid and hopeful before she crushed it down. He was home. So what? He'd probably disappeared into his study within minutes, and she wouldn't see him for days. "Your Grace." Patterson appeared in the library doorway, his expression as unreadable as always. "His Grace requests your presence in the blue study." Requests, as if she had a choice. She followed Patterson through corridors she now knew by heart, past portraits that had stopped judging her because she'd stopped looking at them. The door to the study stood open. Inside, Nathaniel sat behind his desk exactly as he had on her first day here, as if he'd never left. As if 3 weeks hadn't passed. As if she hadn't spent every one of those days alone in his house learning how little she mattered. "Close the door," he said without looking up. Patterson withdrew. The door clicked shut. Eliza stood there, waiting, while her husband finished reading whatever document was apparently more important than greeting his wife. Finally, he set down his pen, looked at her. Those cold blue eyes scanned her face the way they might scan a ledger, checking for discrepancies. "You look well," he said, which was such an obvious lie that Eliza almost laughed. She'd lost weight she couldn't afford to lose. There were shadows under her eyes from too many sleepless nights. Anne had mentioned it twice while helping her dress. "Thank you, Your Grace." "I trust everything has been satisfactory during my absence?" Satisfactory. What a word. Was it satisfactory to be treated like an expensive ghost in her own home? Was it satisfactory to watch a child bleed in the scullery because the housekeeper considered suffering character building? Was it satisfactory to eat alone every night at a table built for 30 while servants whispered about how the merchant's daughter didn't belong? "Perfectly satisfactory," she said. Something flickered in his expression. Was it disappointment? But it was gone before she could be sure. "Good. Then we understand each other." He opened a drawer, pulled out a small leather box, and slid it across the desk toward her. "I brought this from London. It belonged to my mother." Eliza opened the box. Inside, nestled on black velvet, lay a necklace of sapphires and diamonds that probably cost more than her father's entire estate had been worth. It was breathtaking. It was also completely impersonal, the kind of gift one gave to fulfill an obligation. "It's beautiful," she said, because that's what she was supposed to say. "You'll wear it to the Ashford ball next week." Not a request. "Lady Ashford is Catherine's aunt. She's been eager to meet you." Catherine, the dead wife. Of course Eliza would have to parade before her relatives, be inspected and judged and found wanting by people who'd known and loved the woman she could never replace. I'll be honored to attend, Your Grace. There will be other events throughout the season. You'll receive invitations. Accept them all unless I specifically instruct otherwise. He picked up his pen again. Mrs. Beatrice will coordinate with your lady's maid regarding appropriate attire. I don't have a lady's maid, only Anne, who helps me dress. His pen paused. Anne is a housemaid. I'll have someone appropriate sent from London. I don't want someone from London. The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Anne suits me perfectly well. Nathaniel looked up, and for the first time, something like actual attention focused on her. A duchess requires a proper lady's maid. Someone trained in... Anne is trained. She's been here 5 years. She knows the household. Eliza took a step closer to the desk, surprising herself with her own boldness. Unless you're saying I'm not allowed to choose my own servants? The silence stretched. She'd challenged him, directly. Probably a mistake, but she was so tired of having every tiny decision made for her. Fine, he said finally. Anne it is. But she'll need additional training in hairdressing, and she's perfectly capable. Another pause. Then, incredibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, more like acknowledgement that she'd won something so small it barely counted. Very well. Was there anything else? Yes, she wanted to say. There's everything else. There's the fact that you left me here for 3 weeks without a word. There's Mary's bleeding hands and Mrs. Beatrice's contempt and the way your servants treat me like I'm invisible. There's the fact that we're married and you've spoken more words to me in this conversation than in all the time since the wedding combined. No, Your Grace, nothing else? Then you're dismissed. Dismissed, like a servant, like nothing. Eliza turned toward the door, her throat tight, but stopped with her hand on the knob. Your Grace? Yes? Thank you for the necklace. I'll wear it proudly. She paused. Even though we both know it means nothing. She didn't wait to see his reaction, just pulled the door open and walked out before he could see how badly her hands were shaking. The Ashford ball was exactly the nightmare Eliza had anticipated. Worse, actually, because her imagination hadn't been cruel enough. The carriage ride took 2 hours, during which Nathaniel read correspondence by lamplight and didn't speak a single word to her. Anne had dressed her in emerald silk that probably cost more than most people earned in a year, styled her hair in an elaborate arrangement that took an hour to create, and clasped the sapphire necklace around her throat. Eliza looked like a duchess. She felt like an imposter. The Ashford estate was smaller than Ashworth Manor, but still magnificent, all lit windows and music spilling into the night. Carriages lined the drive, disgorging passengers in silks and jewels. Eliza watched through the window as elegant couples climbed the steps, laughing and chatting with the ease of people who belonged in this world. Remember, Nathaniel said as their carriage stopped, still not looking at her, you represent this family now. Conduct yourself accordingly. What did that mean? Don't embarrass me. Don't speak unless spoken to. Don't remind everyone I'm not Catherine. Before she could ask, a footman opened the door and Nathaniel stepped out. Extended his hand to her, not out of affection, but because that's what husbands did. Eliza took it, climbed down, and felt every eye in the vicinity turn to assess her. The whispers started immediately. That's her? The new Duchess? I heard her father was a merchant, in trade. How desperate was Voss to marry that? Poor Catherine must be rolling in her grave. Nathaniel's grip on her arm tightened slightly, a warning. Eliza lifted her chin and walked beside him up those steps, into a house full of people who'd already decided she didn't belong. The ballroom was a sea of silk and candlelight. An orchestra played in a gallery above. Couples twirled across the dance floor with practiced grace. And standing near the entrance, waiting like a spider in her web, was a woman who could only be Lady Ashford. She was perhaps 60, still beautiful in the way wealthy women managed to be, her silver hair arranged in an elaborate style and her neck dripping diamonds. Her eyes, the same shade of blue Catherine's had been in her portrait, locked onto Eliza with the precision of a hawk spotting prey. Nathaniel. Her voice was cultured, cold. How good of you to come. Lady Ashford. Nathaniel inclined his head. May I present my wife, Eliza. Wife. Not the Duchess. Not my beloved. Just wife, stated as bare fact. Lady Ashford's gaze raked over Eliza from head to toe, and Eliza watched as the woman catalogued every perceived flaw: her unfashionable height, her too dark coloring, the way she held herself without the practiced ease of someone born to this world. How charming. The pause before charming said everything. Catherine's necklace suits you, though of course it suited her better. Direct hit. First words out of her mouth and already drawing blood. Lady Ashford is too kind, Eliza managed. Am I? The older woman's smile was all teeth. We must talk later, my dear. I'm so eager to hear all about you, your background, your family, how you and Nathaniel came to this arrangement. Arrangement. Not marriage, not union. Arrangement. I look forward to it, Eliza lied. They moved into the crowd, and immediately Nathaniel was absorbed by a group of men discussing politics and trade. Eliza found herself standing alone at the edge of the ballroom, watching dancers whirl past while conversations ebbed and flowed around her but never included her. You're the new Duchess, a woman's voice, sharp with curiosity. Eliza turned to find three ladies, all beautiful, all dripping with jewels, all looking at her like she was a curiosity in a museum. I am. How unexpected. The speaker was perhaps 30, blonde, with the kind of face men wrote poems about. We were all so shocked when we heard Nathaniel had remarried. And to someone so... She trailed off meaningfully. Different? Eliza supplied. I was going to say unknown. The woman smiled. I'm Lady Caroline Winters. This is Lady Margaret Pembroke and Miss Harriet Ashford. Ashford, another relative. A pleasure, Eliza said, though it very much wasn't. Tell us, Lady Caroline continued, her eyes gleaming with malice barely disguised as interest. How did you meet Nathaniel? We're all dying to know the story. The story. Right. The story of how her father had gambled away his fortune and paid off his debts with his daughter. That story. Through family connections, Eliza said vaguely. How mysterious. Lady Caroline exchanged glances with her companions. It's just that we all knew Catherine so well, you see. She was such a light in society, so accomplished, so perfect for Nathaniel. We still miss her terribly. I'm sure you do. She played the pianoforte beautifully, and her watercolors, absolute masterpieces. She could speak 3 languages fluently, and of course she knew everyone worth knowing. Lady Caroline tilted her head. What are your accomplishments, Your Grace? It was a trap. Whatever Eliza said would be wrong. Too much, and she'd seem boastful. Too little, and she'd confirm their suspicions of her inadequacy. I read, she said finally. Read. Lady Caroline's laugh was like breaking glass. How quaint. What do you read? Currently? Agricultural journals. The 3 women stared at her as if she'd announced she liked to eat dirt. Agricultural journals, Lady Margaret repeated slowly. Whatever for? Because the estate has tenants whose livelihoods depend on farming practices, and I thought it might be useful to understand. Oh, darling, Lady Caroline actually patted Eliza's arm, the gesture dripping with condescension. Those matters are for stewards and managers. Ladies don't concern themselves with such things. Catherine certainly never... Catherine isn't here, Eliza interrupted, surprised by the steel in her own voice. I am. The smile froze on Lady Caroline's face. Indeed. How could we forget? They drifted away, already whispering, already spreading whatever poison they'd wanted to deliver. Eliza watched them go and felt something hot and angry coiling in her chest. The evening ground on. Eliza stood by pillars and smiled politely, while women who'd known Catherine made sure she understood exactly how inferior she was. She accepted drinks from footmen and didn't drink them because her hands were shaking too badly. She watched Nathaniel across the ballroom, always surrounded by people, always in his element, never once looking her way. Until he did. Their eyes met across the crowd, and for just a moment Eliza saw something in his expression. Was it concern? But then Lady Caroline appeared at his elbow, her hand on his arm, her face tilted up toward his with the kind of easy intimacy that spoke of long acquaintance. She said something that made him smile, an actual smile that Eliza had never seen directed at her, and then they were moving toward the dance floor together. Eliza watched her husband take another woman in his arms, watched them move together with practiced ease, as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. Watched Lady Caroline laugh at something he said. Watched his hand rest on her waist. Watched them look like a couple in a way she and Nathaniel never had, and never would. They were engaged once, you know. Eliza turned to find an elderly woman beside her, dressed in purple silk, her eyes kind beneath white brows. Excuse me? Lady Caroline and Nathaniel, years ago, before he married Catherine. Everyone expected them to wed, but Caroline's father had debts, and Nathaniel married Catherine instead. Better family connections, you see. Caroline married Lord Winters, but he died 2 years ago, left her wealthy and free. The old woman sipped her champagne. She's been waiting for Nathaniel ever since. I see. Eliza's voice sounded strange even to her own ears. I'm Lady Thornbury, by the way, friend of your husband's late mother, and I'm telling you this not to be cruel, my dear, but because you should know what you're up against. She patted Eliza's hand. Half the women in this room expected Nathaniel to marry Caroline after Catherine died. The other half simply assumed he'd never remarry at all. Your arrival shocked everyone, including my husband, apparently. Lady Thornbury's laugh was sudden and genuine. Oh, I like you. You've got spine. Catherine was lovely but spineless as a jellyfish. Let everyone walk all over her, especially that dragon of an aunt. She nodded toward Lady Ashford, who was watching Nathaniel and Caroline dance with an expression of approval. But you might actually survive this. Survive what? This world, these people. They're going to test you, dear, push you, try to break you. The question is whether you'll break or push back. Before Eliza could respond, the music ended. Nathaniel escorted Lady Caroline back to the edge of the floor, bowed over her hand, actually bowed, more courtesy than he'd ever shown his own wife, and then, finally, looked in Eliza's direction. Their eyes met. He said something to Lady Caroline, who glanced at Eliza with an expression that was pure triumph, and then he was walking toward her. We're leaving, he said without preamble. But the ball isn't now. He didn't wait for agreement, just turned and headed toward the exit. Eliza followed because what else could she do? Let him abandon her here? The carriage ride back was silent except for the sound of wheels on road. Eliza stared out the window at darkness rushing past and tried to understand what had just happened. Why had he pulled her away so abruptly? Was he angry, embarrassed by her? That went well, she said finally, unable to bear the silence. Reasonably, his voice was flat. Lady Caroline seems very fond of you. We're old friends. Is that what you call it? His head turned sharply. What exactly are you implying? Nothing. Eliza kept her eyes on the window. Just that you danced with her, smiled at her, looked at her like she was a person worth seeing. Don't be ridiculous. Am I? She turned to face him now, anger overriding caution. You barely acknowledge I exist. You leave me alone in your house for weeks. You ignore me at every opportunity. But Lady Caroline makes you laugh within 5 minutes. So forgive me for wondering what I'm doing wrong that she's apparently doing right. This is hardly the place for this conversation. Then where? When? Because you're never available for conversation. You lock your door against me. You speak to me like I'm a servant. No, worse than a servant, because at least you see them when you give orders. Eliza, do you know what tonight was like for me? Her voice was rising, and she didn't care. Standing there while everyone reminded me I'm not Catherine? While your old lover danced with you and looked at me like I was something stuck to her shoe? While I smiled and pretended I belonged in a world that's made it very clear I don't? You're being dramatic. Am I? Tell me then, why did you marry me? Really? Because it certainly wasn't for companionship. It wasn't for affection. It was for money, wasn't it? My father owed you, and this was the price. The silence that followed told her everything. I thought so, she whispered. It's not that simple. Isn't it? I'm a debt paid, a transaction completed, and now you're stuck with me and you can't even pretend to... To what? His voice was cold now. To what, Eliza? What do you expect from me? Something. Anything. Acknowledgement that I'm human. You have everything you need. A home, security, status. Most women would be grateful. Most women weren't sold by their fathers like cattle. The carriage jerked to a stop. They were home. Patterson was opening the door, lamplight spilling in, but neither of them moved. This is what marriage is in our world, Nathaniel said quietly. If you expected romance, you were foolish. I expected basic decency. You have that. Do I? Eliza climbed out of the carriage without his help. Because from where I'm standing, you're simply better at hiding your contempt than everyone else. She walked up the steps and into the manor without looking back. Her vision blurring with tears, she refused to let fall until she was safely behind the locked door of her chambers. Anne was waiting to help her undress, but Eliza sent her away. She needed to be alone, needed to feel the full weight of her humiliation without witnesses. She stood at the window in her elaborate dress and expensive sapphires and understood with perfect clarity this was her life now. This was all it would ever be. Beautiful clothes and cold houses, and a husband who saw her as an obligation he resented having to fulfill. Lady Thornbury's words echoed, "They're going to test you. The question is whether you'll break or push back." Eliza looked at her reflection in the dark window glass, saw herself in Catherine's necklace, wearing Catherine's title, living in Catherine's house, failing to be Catherine in every possible way. She could break. It would be easy. Let the silence and the contempt and the loneliness grind her down until she was just another sad portrait in the gallery. Or she could push back. The thought was small at first, barely a whisper. But as she stood there in the darkness, it grew stronger, louder. She'd spent 3 weeks being invisible, being nothing, accepting Mrs. Beatrice's contempt and the servant's judgment and Nathaniel's indifference, accepting that she had no power, no voice, no place. But what if she stopped accepting it? What if she took the power they refused to give her? The idea was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. She was the Duchess. On paper, at least, this household was hers to manage. These servants were her responsibility. This estate needed what? What did it need that she could actually provide? She thought of Mary's bleeding hands, of the cramped servants' quarters, of the cold dining hall where people who worked 16-hour days ate scraps while she dined alone on delicacies she barely touched. She thought of Anne's surprise when Eliza had shown her basic kindness, of how quickly the young maid had warmed to her once she realized Eliza actually saw her as human. She thought of those agricultural journals she'd been reading, not because she had to, but because she'd had nothing else to do. About crop rotation and yield improvements and tenant management, and she thought about Nathaniel in his study, reviewing documents, making decisions, running this vast enterprise with the kind of control she'd never have. Unless she took it. The idea crystallized. If he wouldn't give her a place in this household, she'd make one. If they wouldn't respect her because of her birth or her title, maybe they'd respect her because of what she actually did. It was audacious, probably stupid, certainly dangerous. But what did she have to lose? Her dignity? Already gone. Her husband's affection? Never had it. The servants' respect? They didn't have any for her anyway. So what was left except to try? Eliza began working the next morning, not in the obvious ways that would bring her into immediate conflict with Mrs. Beatrice or Patterson. She was smarter than that. She started small in places no one was watching. She found Mary in the scullery again, hands still raw, still bleeding. "Come with me," Eliza said. The girl looked terrified. "Your Grace, I can't. The pots will wait. Come." She led Mary to her own chambers, sat her down, and called for Anne. "Bring me the salve from my dressing table and clean bandages." Anne's eyes widened, but she didn't question it, just brought what was needed. Eliza cleaned Mary's hands herself, applied salve that probably cost more than the girl earned in a month, wrapped them carefully. "Now," she said when she was finished, "you're going to rest for 3 days. I'll speak to Mrs. Beatrice." "No!" Mary pulled her hands back. "Please, Your Grace, don't. She'll dismiss me. My family needs this position. We can't." "She won't dismiss you. I won't allow it. You don't understand, Mrs. Beatrice doesn't answer to anyone except His Grace, and he doesn't concern himself with servants. If she wants me gone, I'm gone." Eliza sat back, the reality of her powerlessness washing over her again. Mary was right. One word from the housekeeper and this girl would be thrown out, and there was nothing Eliza could do to stop it. Or was there? "What if," Eliza said slowly, "Mrs. Beatrice never knew you were injured? What if you worked for me instead, as my personal maid's assistant? Anne needs help with all the preparations for these social events. You'd work in my chambers, help with clothes and hair and such. Would you want that?" Mary's eyes went wide. "Your Grace, I'm a scullery maid. I don't know how to—" "Anne will teach you, and I'll make sure Mrs. Beatrice understands this is my direct order." Eliza smiled grimly. "She may run the household, but she can't tell me I'm not allowed to choose my own servants. My husband already confirmed that." It was a small victory, one girl removed from harsh conditions, but it was something, and more importantly, it was hers. Over the next week, Eliza quietly made other changes. She started taking her breakfast in the servants' dining hall, much to everyone's shock. Not every day, that would have been too disruptive, but twice a week she appeared, ate the same food they ate, asked questions about their lives, and actually listened to the answers. At first they were terrified, then confused. Then slowly something shifted. They started talking to her, not much, not freely, but the wall of silence began to crack. She learned that Thomas, one of the footmen, had a sick mother in the village who needed medicine they couldn't afford. She quietly arranged for the estate physician to attend, paying from her own allowance. She learned that the laundry maids worked in conditions that were slowly destroying their backs, bent over washing tubs all day. She requisitioned new equipment, tables at the right height, better soap that didn't burn skin, and when Mrs. Beatrice objected to the expense, Eliza went over her head directly to Mr. Pemberton, the estate manager, with a detailed breakdown of how the improvements would actually increase efficiency and reduce staff turnover costs. She was careful, strategic, never pushing so hard that Mrs. Beatrice could justify escalating to Nathaniel, but always pushing just enough to make small, tangible improvements. And slowly, imperceptibly, the servants' attitudes began to shift. Not all of them. Mrs. Beatrice's contempt only deepened. Patterson remained icily formal. But others, Anne, Mary, Thomas, a handful of younger servants, they started to look at her differently, started to believe that maybe, possibly, the merchant's daughter actually cared about them as humans, rather than as tools to be used and discarded. Eliza also started attending estate meetings. Mr. Pemberton held them monthly in the steward's office, reviewing accounts and agricultural reports and tenant issues. No one invited her. She simply appeared one morning and sat down. "Your Grace." Pemberton looked like she'd grown a second head. "This is hardly— I'm the Duchess. This estate is my concern. Please continue." He'd looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't find grounds to actually refuse her. So she sat through 3 hours of discussions about crop yields and rent collection and tenant disputes, taking notes, asking occasional questions that became less occasional as she learned more. She started visiting the tenant farms, riding out with the estate steward, much to his discomfort, to inspect properties and meet the families who worked the land. She saw their living conditions, heard their concerns, learned about problems that never made it into the formal reports because no one thought they mattered. A family living in a cottage with a roof so damaged it leaked constantly. Eliza ordered repairs immediately. A tenant farmer struggling because his equipment was ancient and breaking down constantly. Eliza arranged for loans to purchase new tools, to be repaid from future harvests. A widow with 3 children about to be evicted because she couldn't work the land alone. Eliza restructured the tenancy, bringing in a younger family to do the physical labor while letting the widow stay and manage the household side of things. None of it was revolutionary. None of it was particularly innovative, but it was effective. And more importantly, it was visible. People saw her riding through the estates, saw her actually listening to their problems, saw her making decisions and following through, and word spread. The merchant's daughter, Duchess, who ate with servants, who fixed leaking roofs, who actually seemed to care whether tenants could feed their children. Eliza felt it changing, not dramatically, not like the sun suddenly breaking through clouds, but gradually, like ice melting, she felt the contempt shifting into something else. Not quite respect yet, but maybe the beginning of it. Of course, it couldn't last. She'd known that. She was disrupting too much, changing too much, making herself too visible. Eventually, someone would push back hard. She just hadn't expected it to be Nathaniel. She was in the estate office reviewing agricultural reports when Patterson appeared in the doorway, his expression even more frigid than usual. "Your Grace, His Grace requires your immediate presence in the blue study." The way he said immediate made her stomach drop. She'd been summoned like a misbehaving child, She found Nathaniel behind his desk, Mr. Pemberton standing off to the side looking distinctly uncomfortable, and Mrs. Beatrice near the door wearing an expression of vindicated satisfaction. "Sit," Nathaniel said, not looking up from the documents before him. Eliza sat, waited. The silence stretched until she wanted to scream. Finally, he looked up and his eyes were cold as winter. "Would you care to explain why estate expenditures have increased by nearly 20% in the past 3 weeks?" "I've been making necessary improvements." "Necessary?" He slid a ledger across the desk toward her. "New washing equipment, roof repairs on 4 tenant cottages, equipment loans, medical care for staff family members. None of this was authorized. I'm the Duchess. I don't need authorization to. This is my estate." His voice didn't rise, but somehow filled the room anyway. "Every penny spent comes from my accounts. Every decision impacts my investments. And you think you can simply, what? Play at being charitable with my money? It's not charity, it's investment. Mr. Pemberton can show you the efficiency reports. Tenant satisfaction has improved, staff morale is higher, productivity. I don't care about staff morale." Each word was precise and cutting. "I care about order, about systems that work because they've worked for generations. And then you arrive and within weeks you're disrupting everything, spending money without approval, making promises I may not be able to keep. So what was I supposed to do?" Eliza stood, anger overriding caution. "Sit in my pretty chambers and embroider? Watch people suffer because fixing their problems might disrupt your precious order? You were supposed to know your place." The words hung in the air like a slap. "My place," Eliza repeated quietly. "And where exactly is that, Your Grace? Because you haven't bothered to tell me. You brought me here, ignored me, left me to figure out how to survive in a world that despises me, and now you're angry because I found a way to actually matter? You're my wife. That's your place. Your wife." She laughed, and it sounded bitter even to her own ears. "I'm your possession, your property. And the problem isn't that I'm disrupting things. It's that I'm reminding everyone that I exist at all." Mrs. Beatrice made a small sound, shock or satisfaction, Eliza couldn't tell. Pemberton was studying the floor like it held the secrets of the universe. Nathaniel stood slowly, and somehow that was more intimidating than if he'd shouted. "You will cease these activities immediately. No more estate meetings, no more tenant visits, no more unauthorized expenditures. You will confine yourself to appropriate activities for a woman of your station." "Or what?" The words came out before she could stop them. "You'll lock me in my chambers? Send me away? Divorce me and ruin both our reputations?" His jaw tightened. "Don't test me, Eliza." "Why not? You've tested me every day since we married, testing whether I'll break, whether I'll fade away like Catherine did. Well, I won't." She moved closer to the desk, her hands flat on its surface, meeting his cold gaze with her own. "I won't sit quietly while people suffer because it's convenient for you. I won't pretend to be invisible because it makes your life easier, and I won't apologize for actually caring about the people whose lives depend on this estate." "You're hysterical." "I'm angry. There's a difference." The silence that followed was electric. Mrs. Beatrice looked like she wanted to applaud. Pemberton looked like he wanted to disappear into the walls. And Nathaniel looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Really seeing her. Not as an obligation or a burden or a ghost of his first wife, but as an actual person with her own will and her own strength. And he didn't seem to know what to do with that. "Leave us," he said finally, not taking his eyes off Eliza. "All of you." Mrs. Beatrice and Pemberton fled. The door closed, and Eliza stood there, her heart hammering, waiting to see if she'd just destroyed the fragile existence she'd been building. "You've made quite an impression," Nathaniel said quietly. "Have I?" "The servants adore you. The tenants sing your praises. Even Pemberton admits you've made some valid points." He moved around the desk, and Eliza had to force herself not to step back. "But you didn't ask permission, didn't consult me, just decided you knew better than systems that have worked for 200 years. Your systems were hurting people." "My systems kept this estate profitable through wars and depressions and failed harvests." He was close now, too close. "What makes you think you understand any of this?" You've been here less than 2 months. I've been here long enough to see what you refuse to look at, which is that people aren't machines, that loyalty built on fear eventually crumbles, that maybe, possibly, treating your tenants and servants like humans instead of assets might actually be better for everyone, including you. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, he laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. You think I don't know that? He turned away, running a hand through his hair in the first uncontrolled gesture she'd ever seen from him. You think I enjoy being the villain? The cold duke who cares only about profit? Then why? Because caring makes you weak. The words exploded out of him. Because the moment you let emotions into business decisions, everything falls apart. Because I've seen what happens when sentiment trumps sense, and I won't... He stopped himself, took a breath. When he spoke again, his voice was controlled once more. You don't understand the pressures of maintaining an estate like this. Then explain them to me. Why would I do that? Because I'm your wife. Because whether you like it or not, I'm part of this now. Because maybe, possibly, having a partner might be better than fighting me at every turn. Something flickered in his expression, longing, regret, but it was gone too quickly to identify. The expenditures stop, he said finally, but I'll review your recommendations. If Pemberton confirms they're genuinely improving efficiency, I'll consider making them permanent. It wasn't what she wanted, but it was more than she'd expected. Thank you, Your Grace. Don't thank me yet. This doesn't change anything between us. Doesn't it? His eyes met hers, and for just a moment the walls came down. She saw exhaustion there, loneliness, pain he kept buried under layers of control. Then the walls snapped back up, and he was the cold duke again. You're dismissed. Eliza left, her legs shaking, her mind racing. She'd stood up to him, challenged him directly. And somehow, impossibly, she hadn't been crushed. She'd survived. But as she climbed the stairs to her chamber, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd glimpsed something important in that moment when his control slipped. Something broken in him. Something that made her wonder whether he was really the villain of this story or just another prisoner in a different kind of cage. That night, for the first time since their wedding, she heard sounds from the adjacent chamber. Footsteps. The scrape of furniture. Was he pacing? She pressed her ear to the locked door between their rooms and heard nothing more, but the knowledge that he was there, just on the other side of that door, wide awake at midnight like she was, made something twist in her chest. They were both trapped in this marriage, both playing roles they didn't want, both suffering in their own ways. But where he'd chosen isolation, she'd chosen connection. Where he'd built walls, she'd torn them down. And maybe, just maybe, that made all the difference. In the morning, she found a note on her breakfast tray. Just 3 words in strong, angular handwriting. Well done. N. Eliza stared at those words until her tea went cold. It wasn't much. It wasn't love or affection or even basic warmth, but it was something. And in this cold house, something was more than she'd had yesterday. The real test came 2 weeks later, at another ball, Lady Thornbury's annual event, which apparently everyone who mattered attended. Nathaniel informed her they'd be going with his usual lack of enthusiasm, and Eliza prepared herself for another night of barely concealed contempt. But this time was different. This time, when she entered the ballroom on Nathaniel's arm, people stared. But their expressions weren't quite as hostile. A few even nodded in acknowledgement. Your Grace? An older gentleman approached, someone she didn't recognize. I wanted to thank you personally. My brother's family tenants on your estate, and he says you helped them when no one else would. Fixed their roof before winter, saved their lives, most like. Thank you. I'm glad I could help. The man bowed and moved away, but others had heard. Whispers spread, but this time they weren't entirely poisonous. She caught fragments as she passed. Actually visits the tenants. Eats with the servants, can you imagine? Different from Catherine. That last one still stung, but it didn't feel quite as cutting. Lady Caroline appeared, beautiful as ever in rose silk, her eyes sharp. But before she could say anything, Nathaniel's hand tightened slightly on Eliza's arm. A warning or support, she couldn't tell. Lady Caroline, he said coolly, you look well. Nathaniel. Her smile was brittle. And Eliza, how industrious you've been. Everyone's talking about your little projects. Someone should care about the people, Eliza said evenly. How charitable. Though one does wonder if such common concerns are appropriate for a duchess. One might wonder if cruelty disguised as propriety is appropriate for anyone, Eliza countered. Lady Caroline's smile froze. Around them, conversation stopped. People were listening now, watching this confrontation with avid interest. I beg your pardon? You heard me. Eliza felt Nathaniel tense beside her, but didn't stop. You've spent weeks making sure I know I don't belong here, that I'm not good enough, not educated enough, not refined enough. Well, you're right. I'm not like you. I actually care about something other than maintaining appearances. The silence was absolute now. Lady Caroline's face went white, then red. You dare. She dares, Nathaniel said quietly, and every eye turned to him. My wife dares to actually do something useful with her position. To make real improvements rather than simply attending parties and spreading gossip. Yes, she dares. He looked directly at Lady Caroline, and his expression was cold enough to freeze water, as is her right and her duty as Duchess Voss. The gasps were audible. Nathaniel had just publicly supported Eliza, chosen her over Caroline, made his allegiance clear to everyone who mattered. Lady Caroline looked like she'd been slapped. I see. Her voice shook. How fortunate for you both. Excuse me. She fled, and the crowd parted for her like water. When she was gone, conversation resumed, but it was different now. The whispers were speculative rather than contemptuous, shocked rather than dismissive. That was unwise, Nathaniel murmured in her ear as he led her toward the dance floor. Probably. She'll retaliate. Let her try. His lips twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. Dance with me. Is that a request or an order? Does it matter? He pulled her into his arms before she could answer, and suddenly they were moving across the floor together. His hand was firm on her waist. His other hand held hers with surprising gentleness. This close, she could see details she'd never noticed. The exact shade of his eyes, more gray than blue. A small scar on his jaw. The way his expression softened slightly when he wasn't actively maintaining his cold facade. You didn't have to do that, she said quietly. Defend me. Yes, I did. Why? His eyes met hers, and for once she saw something real there, something honest. Because you were right, and she was cruel, and I... He trailed off, jaw tightening. You what? I'm tired of being alone. The words were so quiet she almost didn't hear them, but she did, and they hit her with the force of a physical blow. They finished the dance in silence, but it wasn't the cold, awful silence she'd grown used to. It was something else, something that felt almost like understanding. When the music ended, Nathaniel didn't immediately release her. I was wrong, he said, still holding her hand. About many things. About you. Was? Am. I am wrong. He took a breath. I don't know how to do this. Be a husband. Be anything other than what I've always been, but... He paused. You're trying to make this work. To build something here. Maybe I should try too. Eliza felt tears pricking her eyes and blinked them back. That would be, nice. He almost smiled, actually almost smiled. Nice. What a word. I'm working with limited material here, Your Grace. Nathaniel. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, the gesture so unexpected she almost flinched. When we're alone, call me Nathaniel. All right. She tested the name. Nathaniel. Something changed in his expression, warmed, opened, like a door unlocking. Then the moment shattered. A footman appeared at Nathaniel's elbow, his face pale with urgency. Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but there's been an incident at the estate. Mr. Pemberton sent word. He says it's urgent. Nathaniel's entire demeanor shifted back to cold efficiency in an instant. What kind of incident? A fire, Your Grace, in one of the tenant cottages. The family got out safely, but... The footman glanced at Eliza. It was the Warwick family. The one Her Grace recently helped. Eliza felt her stomach drop. The Warwicks. The family with the repaired roof. The family where the father had thanked her just last week for caring when no one else did. "We're leaving," Nathaniel said immediately. "Now." They made the journey home in half the time it usually took, the driver pushing the horses hard. Nathaniel said nothing the entire way, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. Eliza watched him and wondered what he was thinking. Was he angry? Worried? Blaming her for bringing this family to his attention in the first place? They arrived to find chaos. Smoke still rising from the remains of a cottage. People gathered in clusters, voices raised, fear and anger mixing into something volatile. And there, standing in the center of it all, was Mr. Warwick, his face black with soot, tears tracking through the grime, holding his youngest child. "Everything's gone," he was saying to Pemberton. "Everything. Where are we supposed to go? What are we supposed to do?" "We'll find temporary housing," Pemberton said, but he sounded uncertain. "In the village, perhaps." The village already crowded. No room for 5 more people. Eliza didn't think, just acted. She stepped forward, pulling free of Nathaniel's grasp. "You'll stay at the manor," she said clearly. "There are empty servants' quarters in the east wing. You and your family will stay there until we can rebuild your cottage properly." Every head turned toward her. Pemberton looked shocked. The gathered tenants looked hopeful. Mrs. Beatrice, who'd appeared from somewhere, looked appalled. "Your Grace," the housekeeper said sharply, "that's hardly appropriate. It's necessary." Eliza didn't look away from Mr. Warwick. "Your family will be safe, fed, warm, for as long as it takes." Your Grace, I don't know what to say. Thank you. Thank you so... Don't thank me, just be safe." She finally looked at Nathaniel, expecting fury, expecting him to countermand her order immediately. Instead, he was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Make it happen, Pemberton. Tonight. And in the morning, we'll assess the damage and start rebuilding." He paused. "Do it right this time, whatever it costs." The relief from the gathered crowd was palpable. People actually smiled at Eliza, at her. The merchant's daughter who'd married above her station was suddenly someone who mattered, who helped, who cared. But as they walked back toward the manor, leaving Pemberton to organize everything, Nathaniel caught her arm. "That was reckless," he said quietly. "Probably. Expensive. Definitely. And exactly what needed to happen." She looked up at him, surprised. His expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. "You confuse me," he said. "Good. Good? You needed confusing. You were too certain of everything." His laugh was startled and genuine. "Perhaps I was." They stood there in the smoke-tinged darkness, and something passed between them. Not love. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of understanding. The first crack in the walls they'd both built. "Come," Nathaniel said finally. "It's been a long night." He offered his arm. Eliza took it, and together they walked into their house, not as strangers or enemies, but as something new, something that might possibly eventually become partners. Behind them, the Warwick family was being escorted to safety by servants who'd learned to respect the Duchess, who actually saw them as human. In front of them, the manor glowed with lamplight, no longer quite as cold as it had been. And for the first time since arriving at Ashworth, Eliza felt like maybe, just maybe, she'd found her place. Not because someone gave it to her, but because she'd taken it. Not because someone gave it to her, but because she'd taken it. The satisfaction lasted exactly 3 days. On the 4th morning, Eliza woke to find Anne standing by her bed, her face pale and her hands twisting in her apron. "Your Grace, I'm so sorry to wake you, but what's happened?" Eliza sat up, her heart already racing. Nothing good ever came from that tone of voice. "It's the village. There's been talk. Bad talk." Anne swallowed hard. "They're saying the fire wasn't an accident." The words hung in the air like poison. "What do you mean, wasn't an accident?" "They're saying someone set it, on purpose. And they're saying..." Anne's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "They're saying it's because you helped the Warwicks. That someone wanted to punish them. To punish you." Eliza threw back the covers, her mind racing. "Who's saying this?" "Everyone. The village is in an uproar, mister. Pemberton's been trying to calm things down, but Anne twisted her hands harder. Your Grace, they found evidence. Lamp oil poured around the cottage foundation, rags soaked in accelerant. Someone meant for that family to burn. The room spun. Eliza gripped the bedpost to steady herself. Where's the Duke? Already gone to the village. He left before dawn. He said... Anne hesitated. He said you should stay here. That it's not safe. Not safe. Eliza repeated the words, tasting their bitterness. In my own estate? Your Grace, please. His Grace was very clear, but Eliza was already moving, pulling on her riding habit with shaking hands. Help me dress, quickly. But His Grace said, I don't care what he said. If someone tried to burn a family alive because I helped them, I'm not hiding in my chambers like a coward. Anne looked torn between loyalty and fear, but finally nodded and helped Eliza into her clothes. Within 15 minutes, Eliza was mounted on her mare, a gentle creature named Moonlight that Nathaniel had provided when she'd asked to learn to ride, and heading down the drive toward the village, ignoring Patterson's protests echoing behind her. The village was chaos. People clustered in the square, voices raised in anger and fear. She heard snatches of conversation as she rode past. Can't trust anyone anymore. The Duchess brings nothing but trouble. Should never have let outsiders change things. Eliza's stomach twisted, but she kept her chin up and her back straight. She found Nathaniel outside the burned cottage, deep in conversation with the local constable and several men she recognized as tenant farmers. His face was set in hard lines, his jaw tight with controlled fury. He saw her approaching and his expression shifted to something between anger and alarm. What are you doing here? He demanded, striding toward her before she'd even dismounted. I told Patterson, I'm not hiding while someone threatens my people. She slid down from the saddle, stumbling slightly. Nathaniel caught her elbow, steadying her, and for a moment his grip was almost gentle. Your people, he repeated quietly. 3 weeks ago you didn't know any of them. 3 weeks ago I was useless. Now I'm not. She pulled free of his grip and faced the constable, a portly man named Watts who looked deeply uncomfortable with the entire situation. What have you found? Watts glanced at Nathaniel, clearly seeking permission. Nathaniel's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Evidence of arson, Your Grace, clear as day. Someone wanted this cottage to burn, and they wanted it to look like an accident, except they weren't very good at it. Watts pulled out a scorched rag from his coat pocket. This was found behind the woodpile, soaked in lamp oil, and there's more. Boot prints in the garden that don't match anyone in the family, signs of forced entry on the back door. So someone broke in, poured accelerant around the cottage, and set it ablaze. Eliza's voice was steady, even though her insides were churning, while a family with 3 children slept inside. Attempted murder, Your Grace, clear as that. Watts tucked the rag away. Question is, who and why? The why is obvious. The voice came from behind them. Eliza turned to find Mr. Hartley, one of the older tenant farmers, his weathered face set in hard lines. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but this started when you started changing things. Some folks don't take kindly to change. Some folks? Nathaniel's voice was dangerously quiet. Be specific, Hartley. The old man shifted uncomfortably. There's been talk in the tavern about how the Duchess is disrupting the natural order, making servants think they're better than they are, giving tenants ideas above their station. Some of the older families, they're not happy about it. Which families? Eliza demanded. Can't say for certain, but Hartley glanced around, then lowered his voice. The Blackwoods have been loudest, and they've had disputes with the Warwicks going back years. Bad blood over boundary lines and water rights. Nathaniel's expression turned glacial. The Blackwoods, of course. You know them? Eliza asked. Oldest tenant family on the estate. 3 generations of working the same land. They consider themselves the natural leaders of the tenant community. His mouth twisted. They've also been the most resistant to any changes I've tried to implement over the years. They prefer things done the old way, the hard way. Then we talk to them, Eliza said. Now. Absolutely not. Nathaniel grabbed her arm. If they're willing to burn a family alive, what do you think they'll do to you? I don't care. Well, I do. The words came out harsh and loud enough that several nearby people turned to stare. Nathaniel's jaw worked, then he lowered his voice. You're not going anywhere near the Blackwoods until we have proof and the constable has them in custody. So we just wait? Let them think they've won? We investigate properly. We don't go charging in like... He stopped himself. Like what? A merchant's daughter who doesn't know her place? His eyes flashed. Like someone I can't afford to lose. The words hit her like a physical blow. Around them, the watching crowd went silent. Even Watts looked away, suddenly fascinated by his boots. Nathaniel seemed to realize what he'd said because his expression shuddered immediately. Go back to the manor, Eliza. That's not a request. I'm not leaving. Patterson. The butler materialized from somewhere, always eerily available when needed. Escort her Grace back to the manor. She's not to leave the grounds until I say otherwise. Nathaniel, now Patterson. The butler's hand was gentle but firm on her elbow. Your Grace, if you please. Eliza wanted to fight, to argue, to refuse, but she saw the set of Nathaniel's jaw, the fear he was trying desperately to hide behind anger, and realized that pushing now would only make things worse. Fine, she said quietly. But this isn't over. No, Nathaniel agreed, his eyes never leaving hers. It isn't. The ride back to the manor felt like a retreat, like she was running from a battle she'd started. The servants who saw her return looked at her with expressions ranging from sympathy to something that might have been blame. Even Anne seemed uncertain as she helped Eliza out of her riding habit. Your Grace, perhaps it would be best if you rested. I don't want to rest. I want to fix this. I'm not sure you can, Your Grace. Anne's voice was soft. Not this time. Eliza paced her chambers like a caged animal, her mind racing. Someone had tried to kill a family because she'd helped them, because she'd dared to change things, and now Nathaniel wanted her to hide while he dealt with it alone, as if she were some delicate flower that couldn't handle reality. She was still pacing when the knock came at her door 3 hours later. Come, Butts. Miss Beatrice entered, and for once the housekeeper's expression wasn't contemptuous. It was something worse, pitying. Your Grace? His Grace has returned and requests your presence in the blue study. Is he alone? No, Your Grace. He's with Lady Caroline Winters and Lord Pemberton. Caroline. Of course Caroline was here. Eliza's stomach dropped, but she lifted her chin. Thank you, Mrs. Beatrice. I'll attend him immediately. The housekeeper hesitated at the door. Your Grace, be careful. There are forces at work here you may not understand. It was the closest thing to kindness Mrs. Beatrice had ever shown her. Eliza nodded, not trusting her voice, and followed the woman downstairs. The blue study was crowded. Nathaniel stood by the window, his back rigid. Caroline sat in a chair near the fireplace, beautiful as always in a traveling dress of deep blue. And Lord Pemberton, Caroline's late husband's cousin and heir to the Winters estate, lounged near the desk with the casual arrogance of old money. All three turned to look at Eliza as she entered. Ah, the controversial Duchess, Pemberton drawled. We were just discussing you. How thoughtful. Eliza kept her voice steady. Though I'm surprised to find such an audience for a private discussion with my husband. Lady Caroline brought news from London, Nathaniel said, his voice carefully neutral. News that concerns you directly. What news? Caroline stood, smoothing her skirts with delicate fingers. My dear, I thought you should know. There's been talk, terrible talk, about your activities here. The way you've been disrupting the household, consorting with servants, making decisions beyond your station. Her smile was sympathetic in the way a knife was sympathetic. People are saying you're unstable, that you've been causing trouble because you can't accept your place in society. People. Eliza's hands clenched at her sides. You mean you've been saying that? I'm merely reporting what I've heard. Caroline's eyes glittered. And now with this terrible fire, with accusations of arson connected to your interference in estate matters. Well, people are wondering if perhaps you're in over your head, if perhaps this marriage was a mistake. That's enough, Caroline, Nathaniel said sharply. Is it? Because from where I'm standing, your wife's reckless behavior has put people in danger. She's disrupted a functioning system, made enemies she doesn't understand, and now a family nearly died because of it. Caroline turned to Eliza. Do you understand what you've done? The chaos you've caused? I helped people who were suffering. You disrupted the natural order. Caroline's composure cracked for just a moment. These estates have hierarchies for a reason, rules that keep everyone in their place. But you, with your merchant-class sensibilities and your naive notions of fairness, you had to meddle. And now look what's happened. The fire wasn't Eliza's fault, Nathaniel said, but his voice lacked conviction. Wasn't it? Lord Pemberton spoke up, his voice lazy but his eyes sharp. Forgive me, Voss, but your wife has made quite a few enemies in a very short time. The Blackwoods are respected members of this community. If they felt threatened enough to take drastic action, you're defending arson? Eliza couldn't believe what she was hearing. I'm suggesting that actions have consequences. You pushed too hard too fast and people pushed back. Pemberton shrugged. That's simply how the world works. Then the world is broken. Perhaps. Caroline moved closer, her expression almost kind. But you can't fix it, darling. You're one woman. You have no real power, no real understanding of how these systems work. And if you keep trying, she glanced at Nathaniel. Well, more people might get hurt, perhaps even you. The threat was barely veiled. Eliza looked at Nathaniel, waiting for him to defend her, to tell Caroline and Pemberton to leave, to do something. Instead, he looked away. Caroline has a point, he said quietly. Your activities have stirred up more trouble than I anticipated. Perhaps it would be best if you stepped back. Let me handle the estate matters from now on. The betrayal was a knife between her ribs. You're siding with them? I'm trying to protect you. By silencing me? By making me invisible again? Her voice rose despite her best efforts. I thought we were past this. I thought you understood. I understand that someone tried to commit murder on my estate, and you're at the center of it. Nathaniel's voice was hard now. I understand that every change you've made has created enemies. I understand that I can't protect you if you keep putting yourself in danger. I never asked you to protect me. I asked you to see me as a partner. Partners don't make unilateral decisions that risk people's lives. Neither do dictators, but that hasn't stopped you. The words came out bitter and sharp. Caroline made a soft sound, sympathy or satisfaction. Eliza couldn't tell. Perhaps we should give you two some privacy. No. Eliza turned to face her directly. You came here to poison him against me. To use this tragedy to put me back in my place. So let's be honest about what this really is. You want me gone. You want Nathaniel for yourself. And you're using frightened tenants and arson to make it happen. Caroline's face went pale, then red. How dare you? How dare I what? Tell the truth? You've been circling like a vulture since the day we married, waiting for your chance. Well, here it is. Here's your moment. Eliza looked at Nathaniel. So make your choice, her or me. The woman who wants you for your title and your wealth, or the woman who actually gives a damn about the people whose lives depend on this estate. The silence that followed was absolute. Lord Pemberton looked fascinated. Caroline looked furious. And Nathaniel looked torn in half. Eliza, he said finally, you're being unreasonable. Am I? Or am I being honest for the first time since we married? You're upset. Understandably so, but you're not thinking clearly. Don't. The word came out sharp as breaking glass. Don't tell me I'm not thinking clearly. Don't tell me I'm hysterical or emotional or any of the other words men use when women refuse to be convenient. She took a step toward him. I have been thinking clearly, more clearly than I ever have. And what I see clearly is that you're scared. Scared of what I represent, scared of change, scared that if you actually let me be your partner, you might have to admit you've been wrong about a lot of things. His jaw tightened. You're out of line. Then dismiss me, send me away, lock me in my chambers, do whatever you need to do to feel in control again. She held his gaze. But don't expect me to thank you for it. She turned and walked out before he could respond, before Caroline could deliver whatever triumphant barb she had prepared, before she completely fell apart in front of people who would love nothing more than to see her broken. Anne was waiting in the corridor, her face anxious. Your Grace, pack my things, Eliza said, her voice shaking. I'm leaving. Leaving? Your Grace, where would you go? Good question. She had no family left. Her mother had taken the money and disappeared to Bath, severing all contact. No friends in society, no resources beyond her allowance, which Nathaniel controlled. Nowhere to run except the village, she said suddenly. I'm going to the village, to talk to the Blackwoods myself. Anne's eyes went wide. Your Grace, no. That's exactly what His Grace forbade. I don't care what he forbade. A family almost died because I tried to help them, and I'm not going to hide while everyone decides my fate without me. Eliza grabbed Anne's shoulders. Please, I need to do this. I need to face them. They'll hurt you. Maybe, but they'll respect me more for facing them than for hiding behind my husband's authority. She released Anne. I need you to do something for me. Find Thomas, the footman. Tell him to have a horse ready at the east gate in 1 hour. Can you do that? Anne looked terrified but nodded. Yes, Your Grace. Good. And Anne, thank you for everything. The girl's eyes filled with tears. Please be careful, Your Grace. Please. Eliza changed into her plainest dress, a dark gray wool that looked more like a servant's clothing than a duchess's, covered her hair with a simple scarf, became as invisible as she'd once been. It was surprisingly easy to slip through the manor unnoticed. Everyone was so focused on the drama in the blue study that no one paid attention to a woman in servant's clothes moving through the shadows. Thomas was waiting at the east gate as promised, holding the reins of a sturdy gelding that looked like it could handle rough terrain. Your Grace, he whispered urgently, are you certain about this? If His Grace finds out I helped you, then blame me. Tell him I threatened you. Eliza took the reins. Which way to the Blackwood farm? 2 miles north, past the old mill. But, Your Grace, they're dangerous. Jacob Blackwood has a reputation for violence, and his sons are worse. I know, that's why I need to go, to show them I'm not afraid. But you should be afraid. Thomas's voice cracked. They could kill you. They could, but I don't think they will. Not if I face them directly without hiding behind my title or my husband's power. She mounted the horse, grateful for the riding lessons Nathaniel had insisted on. If I'm not back by sunset, tell the Duke where I went. But not before then. Promise me. Thomas looked agonized, but finally nodded. I promise, Your Grace, and good luck. Eliza rode out before she could lose her nerve, heading north through fields still wet from recent rain. The afternoon sun was warm on her back, birds sang in the hedgerows, and everything looked peaceful and normal, like the world wasn't falling apart. She found the Blackwood farm easily enough, a large, well-maintained property with fields of wheat stretching toward the horizon. Prosperity built on generations of favored treatment. No wonder they resented her changes. They had the most to lose. She dismounted in the yard, tied the horse to a post, and walked toward the farmhouse. Before she could knock, the door swung open and a man filled the frame. He was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders like a bull and a face weathered by decades of outdoor work. This had to be Jacob Blackwood. What do you want? His voice was a rumble of barely controlled hostility. To talk about the fire, about the changes on the estate, about what happened to the Warwick family. His eyes narrowed. I know who you are. The new Duchess. The one causing all the trouble. Is that what I'm doing, causing trouble? Eliza kept her voice steady. Or am I trying to make things better for everyone, and you just don't like it? Better. He spat the word like it tasted foul. You don't know what better means. You come here from your fancy city life, thinking you understand how things work, how they've always worked. But you don't. You're an outsider. And outsiders bring nothing but chaos. The Warwicks nearly died, Mr. Blackwood. 3 children almost burned alive. Do you call that order? Something flickered in his expression. Was it guilt? I don't know nothing about that fire. Don't you? Eliza took a step closer, ignoring the danger. Evidence suggests otherwise. Boot prints, forced entry, accelerant poured deliberately. The constable is building a case right now. Then let him. Jacob crossed his arms. I've got nothing to hide. Then prove it. Tell me where you were 3 nights ago. Tell me you had nothing to do with this. I don't have to tell you anything. You're not the law. No, but I am the Duchess. And this estate is my responsibility. She moved closer still, close enough to see the broken blood vessels in his nose, the old scars on his knuckles. If you have grievances, tell me. If you think I'm wrong about the changes I've made, explain why. But don't hide behind violence. Don't hurt innocent people because you're too proud to admit the world is changing. For a long moment, Jacob just stared at her. Then incredibly, his mouth twitched. You've got nerve, I'll give you that. Coming here alone. Facing me down like you're not scared. I am scared. I'm terrified. But I'm here anyway. Why? Why do you care so much? These aren't your people. This isn't your world. You could just sit in your manor and live off the Duke's wealth like a proper lady. Why get your hands dirty? Because I can't stand by and watch people suffer when I have the power to help them. Eliza's voice cracked slightly. Because I know what it's like to be powerless. To have no control over your own life. And if I have power now, even just a little, I'm going to use it to make things better. Even if that makes me unpopular. Even if it makes enemies. Jacob studied her for a long moment. Then he stepped aside. Come in. We'll talk. The interior of the farmhouse was surprisingly comfortable. Rough wooden furniture but clean, a fire crackling in the hearth, the smell of baking bread. Two younger men sat at a table near the fire, both looking wary as Eliza entered. My sons, Jacob said. Michael and Thomas. Boys, this is the Duchess, the one everyone's talking about. We know who she is, the older one, Michael, said. His eyes were hard. Question is why she's here. To find out the truth, Eliza sat without being invited, a calculated risk. One of you set that fire, or knows who did. I want to know why. The silence stretched. Finally, Thomas, the younger son, couldn't have been more than 19, spoke up. It wasn't supposed to hurt anyone. Just scare them, make them leave. Thomas! Jacob's voice was sharp with warning. No, Pa. I'm tired of lying. The boy looked at Eliza, his face miserable. It was me. I set the fire. But I swear I didn't know the family was inside. I thought they'd gone to the village for the market. I just wanted to send a message. What message? Eliza asked quietly. That things should stay the way they've always been. That you shouldn't meddle. Thomas's hands shook. But I checked wrong. Got the timing wrong. When I heard they were inside, that the children almost... His voice broke. I never meant for anyone to get hurt. I just wanted things to go back to normal. Normal? Eliza looked at Jacob. Is this what normal looks like? Children burning because one family gets better treatment than another? We've been on this land for 3 generations, Jacob said heavily. Worked it, improved it, built prosperity through hard work and following the rules. Then you come along and start giving special treatment to the Warwicks, who've only been here 10 years and barely make their rents, fixing their roof, giving them equipment, while we get nothing. How is that fair? It's fair because they needed help and you didn't. Your farm is prosperous, your family is healthy. The Warwicks were struggling. Eliza leaned forward. But you're right that I should have consulted you. Should have explained my reasoning, should have treated you with the respect your experience deserves. I was so focused on fixing immediate problems that I didn't consider how it would look to those who've been doing things right all along. Jacob blinked, clearly not expecting that. You're admitting you were wrong. I'm admitting I could have handled it better. But I'm not wrong about the principle. People who are struggling deserve help, and people who are doing well should be glad to see their neighbors lifted up, not resentful of it. Easy words when you've never gone hungry. You're wrong about that. Eliza met his eyes. My father lost everything. We were days away from debtor's prison. I know exactly what desperation feels like. And I know what it's like to be invisible, to not matter, to be nothing but a burden. That's why I can't ignore it when I see others suffering. Michael spoke up for the first time. So what happens now? You turn Thomas over to the constable? He gets hung for arson? No. Eliza took a deep breath. Here's what happens. Thomas confesses, publicly, takes responsibility for what he did, and then he works to rebuild the Warwick cottage, every day, for as long as it takes, under my supervision. You're not sending him to prison? Jacob looked suspicious. What good would that do? Your family would lose a worker, Thomas would lose his future, and the Warwicks would still be without a home. Eliza stood. But this isn't mercy, it's justice. He caused this harm, so he fixes it. And in the process, maybe he learned something about the people he tried to hurt. Thomas looked up, tears streaming down his face. Why would you do that, after what I did? Because punishment isn't the same as justice. And because I think you're not a bad person, just a scared one who made a terrible choice. She looked at Jacob. But if he fails, if he runs or refuses or causes any more harm, I'll see him prosecuted to the full extent of the law. Do we have an understanding? Jacob studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. We do. And thank you. You didn't have to show mercy. It's not mercy. It's me trying to build something better than what we had. Eliza moved toward the door. And Mr. Blackwood? Next time you have a grievance, come to me. Talk to me. Don't let it fester until someone does something we all regret. She was halfway to her horse when Jacob called out, Your Grace, you're not what we expected, not what they said you'd be. No? She looked back. No, you're tougher and fairer. He nodded slowly. Might be we were wrong about you. It was the closest thing to an apology she was likely to get. Eliza accepted it with a nod of her own and rode away, her heart still pounding, her hands shaking on the reins now that the danger had passed. She'd done it, faced them down, found the truth, made them see her as something other than an interfering outsider. But as she rode back toward the manor, she realized the real battle was still ahead. Because Nathaniel wouldn't see this as courage. He'd see it as reckless disobedience. And Caroline would make sure everyone in society knew about it. The sun was setting as she returned, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. She found the manor in uproar, servants rushing about, voices raised, and at the center of it all, Nathaniel standing in the entrance hall looking like murder incarnated. He saw her the moment she walked through the door, strode toward her with such fury in his eyes that several servants actually backed away. Where the hell have you been? His voice was deadly quiet. The Blackwood farm. Talking to... He grabbed her arm, not gently. Are you insane? I forbade you from going there, explicitly. I know, but I had to... You had to nothing. He pulled her toward the blue study, not caring who saw, not caring about propriety, slammed the door behind them. You could have been killed. Do you understand that? They could have hurt you, beaten you, worse. But they didn't, because you were lucky. He was shouting now, all control gone. Lucky they didn't decide a dead Duchess was easier to deal with than a troublesome one. Lucky they were decent enough to listen instead of simply solving their problem with violence. I found out who set the fire. Thomas Blackwood confessed, and I arranged for him to make restitution instead of, I don't care. Nathaniel's face was flushed, his hands shaking. I don't care about the fire or the confession or your brilliant solution. All I care about is that you deliberately disobeyed me, put yourself in danger, and seem to think that's perfectly acceptable behavior. It's not about obedience, it's about doing what's right. It's about you not being my partner, but being my liability. The words exploded out of him. You don't consult me. You don't tell me your plans. You just charge forward doing whatever you think is right and expect me to clean up the mess afterward. That's not partnership, Eliza. That's chaos. She felt like she'd have been slapped. I thought you understood. I thought I did too, but clearly I was wrong. He moved to the window, his back to her. Caroline was right. This marriage was a mistake. The words hung in the air like poison. Eliza felt something break inside her chest, something she hadn't even realized was still whole. I see, she said quietly. So that's it. One difficult situation and you're ready to give up. I'm being realistic. We're too different. We want different things, and if we keep going like this, one of us is going to destroy the other. Then let's be clear about who's destroying whom. Her voice was steady now, cold. You brought me here, married me, put me in an impossible situation, and then blamed me for trying to survive it. You wanted me to be invisible, to be nothing, to be content with pretty dresses and empty rooms. And when I refused, when I actually tried to build something meaningful, you called it chaos. He turned, his face hard. What I called it was dangerous. Everything worth doing is dangerous. She moved closer. You're afraid. That's what this really is. You're afraid that if you actually let me in, if you actually trust me, You might have to change, might have to admit that the way things have always been done isn't necessarily the best way. And that terrifies you more than anything else. You don't know what you're talking about, don't I? She was close enough now to see the pulse jumping in his throat. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you're not scared of what I represent. He opened his mouth, closed it. For a moment, she saw something raw and honest in his eyes. Pain, fear, longing, all mixed together. Then the walls slammed back up. It doesn't matter what I'm scared of. What matters is that this isn't working. We're not working. He moved to the desk, pulled out a document. I've had my solicitor draw up papers. A separation agreement. You'll be provided for, of course. A house and bath, an allowance, everything you need. But you'll live separately. We'll maintain the appearance of marriage for society's sake. But in practice, you're throwing me away. The realization hit her like a physical blow, just like everyone else did. I'm protecting us both from making this worse than it already is. No. The word came out fierce. No. I won't accept that. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. She grabbed the document from his hands, tore it in half, and I choose to fight. For this marriage. For this estate. For everything we could be if you'd just stop being so damn afraid. Eliza, no, you listen to me now. Her voice shook but didn't break. I came here with nothing. I was nothing. A debt paid, a transaction completed. But I built something here. I made people's lives better. I created real change. And yes, it caused problems. Yes, it made enemies. But it also made things better for people who had no hope of better before I arrived. At what cost? At the cost of comfort, of complacency, of pretending everything is fine when it's not. She stepped closer. You can send me away. Separate from me. Pretend I never existed. But you can't undo what I've done. The servants who I treated like humans won't forget that. The tenants whose lives I improved won't forget that. And you, she met his eyes. You won't forget that for just a moment we were actually partners, actually building something together. The silence stretched between them, heavy and painful. Nathaniel's expression was unreadable, his hands clenched at his sides. Finally, he spoke. Get out. Nathaniel, get out, now, before I say something we'll both regret. Eliza stood her ground for one more moment, waiting for him to take it back, to reach for her, to show even the smallest sign that he felt something beyond anger and frustration. Nothing came. She walked to the door, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall, paused with her hand on the knob. You're going to regret this, she said softly. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday you'll realize what you threw away, and by then it'll be too late. She left before he could respond, before she completely fell apart, before she let him see how thoroughly he'd broken her. The corridors were empty as she climbed the stairs to her chambers. The servants had made themselves scarce, probably sensing the brewing storm. Eliza reached her door and pushed it open, and stopped dead. The room had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out, clothes scattered across the floor, her few personal possessions dumped in a pile. And on her bed, arranged carefully like a message, were 3 dead roses and a note written in harsh, angular handwriting. Leave or burn. Her hands went cold. This wasn't the Blackwoods. They'd already confessed, already accepted her judgment. This was someone else, someone in the house. Your Grace? Anne appeared in the doorway, saw the destruction, and gasped. What happened? Who did this? I don't know. Eliza picked up the note with shaking fingers. But someone wants me gone badly enough to threaten me in my own chambers. We should tell His Grace. No. The word came out sharp. He wants me gone anyway. This just gives him an excuse. But Your Grace, you're in danger. The window exploded inward in a shower of glass. Eliza screamed, throwing her arms up to protect her face. Anne shrieked and dove for the floor. And through the broken window, flames licked upward from something that had been thrown inside. A torch, still burning, setting the curtains alight. Fire! Anne scrambled to her feet. Your Grace, we have to go. But Eliza was staring at the burning curtains, at the smoke already filling the room, at the broken glass scattered across the floor like diamonds. Someone had just tried to kill her. In her own home. In the one place she should have been safe. And suddenly she understood with perfect clarity. This wasn't about change or disruption or challenging the old ways. This was about power. Someone wanted her dead. "Get water!" Eliza shouted, already grabbing the quilt from her bed to smother the flames crawling up the curtains. The fabric was heavy in her hands, awkward, but she threw it over the fire and beat at it with her fists, ignoring the heat that singed her palms. Anne was screaming for help in the corridor, her voice high and panicked. Footsteps thundered on the stairs, servants responding to the alarm. Someone thrust a bucket of water into Eliza's hands, and she threw it at the burning curtains. Then another, until finally the flames sputtered and died, leaving nothing but smoke and the acrid smell of burned fabric. She stood there gasping, her dress soaked, her hands blistered, and looked at the broken window, at the torch that had been thrown through it, now nothing but charred wood on her floor. Someone had tried to burn her alive, just like they'd tried to burn the Warwicks. "Your Grace!" Patterson appeared in the doorway, his usually impassive face showing actual alarm. Behind him, more servants crowded, their expressions ranging from shock to fear to something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Are you hurt?" "No." Her voice sounded strange even to her own ears, too calm, too controlled. "But someone just tried to kill me, in my own chambers, while I was inside." The servants exchanged glances. Patterson's jaw tightened. "I'll summon His Grace immediately." "No." Eliza turned to face him, and something in her expression must have been fierce because he actually took a step back. "Not yet. First, I want to know who did this. Someone in this house threw that torch. Someone who knew exactly which window was mine. Someone who had access to the grounds." "Your Grace, with all respect, we should secure your safety first." "My safety?" She laughed, and it came out bitter. "I haven't been safe since I arrived here, but I've been too naive to see it. Too focused on trying to fit in, trying to make everyone like me." She looked at the gathered servants, seeing them with new clarity. "But someone here wants me dead, and I'm going to find out who." "Eliza!" Nathaniel's voice cut through the murmuring crowd like a blade. He pushed through the servants, his face pale, and stopped dead when he saw the destruction. The broken window, the burned curtains, the water pooled on the floor. "What happened?" "Someone tried to kill me." She met his eyes. "With fire, just like they tried to kill the Warwicks." His expression shifted from alarm to something harder. "Everyone out, now." The servants fled. Even Patterson retreated, though he lingered in the doorway as if uncertain whether to leave entirely. Nathaniel crossed to Eliza, his hands reaching for her shoulders, then stopping as if he wasn't sure he had the right to touch her anymore. "Are you hurt?" "My hands, burns, nothing serious." "Let me see." He took her hands gently, examining the red, blistered skin. His jaw tightened. "You need the physician. I need whoever did this caught." She pulled her hands back. "Before they try again. They won't get the chance. You're not staying in this room. Not tonight. Not until—" "Until what? Until you send me away like you planned?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "This doesn't change anything between us, Nathaniel. Someone wants me dead, but you wanted me gone anyway. Maybe they're just doing your work for you." He flinched like she'd struck him. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? An hour ago you were drawing up separation papers. Now someone tries to burn me alive and suddenly you care." She moved past him toward the door, her legs steadier than she'd expected. "Forgive me if I don't find your concern particularly convincing." "Eliza, wait!" But she was already in the corridor, heading downstairs with purpose she didn't entirely feel but was determined to project. Behind her, she heard Nathaniel following, heard him barking orders to Patterson about securing the grounds and questioning the staff, but she didn't slow down. She had a killer to catch. The servants were gathered in the entrance hall, clustered in nervous groups, whispering. They fell silent when Eliza appeared, their eyes tracking her descent down the grand staircase. She was acutely aware of how she must look, dress soaked and torn, hair wild, hands blistered and red. Not a duchess. A survivor. "Listen to me," she said, her voice carrying in the vast space. "Someone in this house just tried to kill me. Threw a torch through my window while I was inside. I want to know who." More whispers, exchanged glances. But no one spoke up. "Whoever did this isn't just my enemy. They're everyone's enemy. Because if they're willing to burn down a chamber in the manor, they're willing to risk burning down the whole house. with all of you inside. That got their attention. Fear rippled through the crowd. So I'm asking again, did anyone see anything, hear anything, notice anyone acting strangely? Silence. Then finally a voice from the back. I saw someone. It was Mary, the scullery maid Eliza had helped. She pushed through the crowd, her face pale but determined. In the gardens, about half an hour ago. Someone in a dark cloak moving toward the manor. I thought it was odd because it wasn't any of the gardeners, and it was getting dark. Did you see their face? No, Your Grace, but Mary hesitated. They moved like a woman, the way they walked, and they were tall. A woman. Tall. Eliza's mind raced through possibilities. Mrs. Beatrice was tall, several of the housemaids. But also, Lady Caroline, she said quietly. The name hung in the air like an accusation. Nathaniel, who'd followed her down, made a sound of protest. That's absurd. Caroline wouldn't she? Eliza turned to face him. She wants you. She's wanted you for years, and I'm in the way. She made that very clear today when she came here spreading poison about me. Spreading truth, you mean, about how reckless you've been. So reckless I deserve to die for it? Her voice rose. Is that what you think? Of course not. But Caroline isn't capable of murder. Everyone's capable of murder if they want something badly enough. She looked at the assembled servants. Where is Lady Caroline now? Patterson stepped forward, his expression troubled. She departed before the fire, Your Grace. Took her leave perhaps 15 minutes before the alarm was raised. How convenient. Eliza turned back to Nathaniel. She's here spreading poison, creating conflict between us, then leaves just before someone tries to kill me. You don't find that suspicious? I find it coincidental at best. Then you're blind. The words came out harsh. Or you don't want to see. Because seeing would mean accepting that the woman you used to love is capable of terrible things. His face went white. Don't. Don't what? Tell the truth? You loved her once. Maybe you still do. Maybe that's why you're so eager to believe I'm the problem, and she's the innocent victim of my chaos. That's not... He stopped himself, jaw working. Then quietly, even if you're right, we have no proof. Mary saw someone in a cloak. That's not evidence. Then we get evidence. Eliza was already moving toward the door. We go to her estate, tonight, confront her. Make her tell us the truth. Absolutely not. You're not going anywhere near Caroline if she's dangerous, then come with me. Protect me if you're so concerned. She grabbed her cloak from where a servant held it. Or stay here and pretend everything is fine while someone plots my murder. Your choice. She was out the door before he could stop her, heading toward the stables. Her hands throbbed with every movement, but she ignored the pain, ignored everything except the white-hot fury burning in her chest. Someone had tried to kill her, and she was done being a victim. Nathaniel caught up with her at the stables, his face set in hard lines. You're not doing this alone. I never asked you to come. I don't care what you asked. He nodded to a groom. Saddle 2 horses, fast ones. They rode through darkness, the horses' hooves thundering on the road. Eliza's hand screamed with pain every time she gripped the reins, but she didn't slow down. Behind her, Nathaniel kept pace, his silence more oppressive than any argument. The Winters estate was smaller than Ashworth but elegant, all pale stone and manicured grounds. Lights blazed in the windows despite the late hour. Eliza dismounted before her horse had fully stopped and strode toward the entrance. A startled butler opened the door. Your Graces, we weren't expecting... Where is Lady Caroline? Eliza demanded. In the drawing room, Your Grace, but... Eliza pushed past him, Nathaniel close behind. She found the drawing room easily, followed the sound of voices and laughter, pushed open the doors without knocking. Caroline sat by the fireplace with Lord Pemberton and 2 other guests Eliza didn't recognize, all of them holding wine glasses and looking comfortable. Caroline looked up at Eliza's entrance, her perfect face registering first surprise, then something that might have been fear before her expression smoothed into polite confusion. Eliza, what a surprise! We weren't expecting... Her eyes widened, taking in Eliza's disheveled appearance. Good heavens, what happened to you? Someone threw a torch through my window tonight, tried to burn me alive. Eliza moved closer, watching Caroline's face carefully. Funny thing is, you left Ashworth just minutes before it happened. And you think I... Caroline set down her wine glass with a delicate clink. That's a serious accusation, darling. Is it? You made your feelings about me very clear today. You want me gone. You want Nathaniel for yourself. You've been poisoning everyone against me since the day we married. I've been telling the truth about your reckless behavior. That's hardly the same as attempted murder. Caroline's voice was calm, but her eyes had gone cold. And I have witnesses who can confirm I've been here all evening. Lord Pemberton, you arrived when? Just after you did, my dear. Perhaps 6 o'clock? We've been here together ever since. Pemberton's smile was oily. So you see, Your Grace, Lady Caroline couldn't possibly have been at Ashworth. She was here, with us. Eliza felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Caroline had an alibi. Of course she did. She was too smart to do this without one. Then you hired someone, Eliza said, but she heard the desperation in her own voice. Paid someone to do it for you. Again, serious accusations without proof. Caroline stood, smoothing her skirts. Nathaniel, surely you're not going to allow your wife to continue making these wild claims. She's clearly not well. The stress of recent events has obviously... Someone tried to kill her? Nathaniel's voice was quiet but carried weight. In our home, while she was inside. So forgive me if I'm less concerned with propriety than with finding who's responsible. Caroline's expression flickered. Satisfaction, quickly hidden. Of course. How terrible for you both. But you must see, this is exactly what I warned you about. Eliza has made enemies, stirred up resentments, and now those resentments are turning violent. It's tragic, really, but not surprising. You're blaming me for someone trying to murder me? Eliza couldn't believe what she was hearing. I'm saying actions have consequences. You pushed too hard, too fast, and now you're paying the price. Caroline moved closer, her voice dropping to something almost sympathetic. And I'm sorry about that, truly. But perhaps this is a sign that you should accept Nathaniel's offer of separation. For your own safety. If you're not at Ashworth, you're not a target. The manipulation was so smooth it almost worked. Almost made sense. Remove Eliza from the estate and the problem goes away. Caroline gets what she wants without getting her hands dirty. No, Eliza said firmly. I'm not leaving. I'm not running. And I'm not letting whoever did this win. Caroline's smile turned pitying. Then I'm afraid you're going to get yourself killed. And when you do, don't say I didn't warn you. It was a threat. Veiled, but unmistakable. Eliza saw it. Nathaniel must have seen it too because his hand moved to Eliza's arm, protective. We're leaving, he said. But this isn't over, Caroline. Isn't it? Caroline's smile was serene. I think you'll find it is. One way or another. They rode back in tense silence. Eliza's hands were shaking now, adrenaline fading and leaving her cold and exhausted. She'd been so certain it was Caroline, so sure that confronting her would yield answers. Instead, she had nothing but an alibi and veiled threats. She did it, Eliza said finally. I know she did. Knowing and proving are different things. Nathaniel's voice was weary. And she's right about one thing. You've made yourself a target. Maybe separation is... Don't. She pulled her horse to a stop. Don't you dare suggest that again. This is what she wants. For me to run. To give up. To hand you over to her without a fight. Then what do you suggest? Because someone is trying to kill you, Eliza, and I can't... His voice cracked. I can't protect you if you won't let me. I don't need protection. I need a partner. Someone who believes me, who trusts me. She urged her horse forward again. But if you can't be that person, then fine. I'll do this alone. They reached Ashworth to find chaos. Lamps blazed in every window. Servants rushed about carrying messages and buckets of water. And in the courtyard, Constable Watts stood talking to Patterson, his face grim. Your Graces. He turned as they approached. I was just about to send word. We've had a development. What kind of development? Nathaniel dismounted, then moved to help Eliza down. She ignored his offered hand and slid off herself, stumbling slightly. We found the person who threw the torch. Or rather, they found us. Watts gestured toward the manor. Turned themselves in about an hour ago. Confessed to everything. Eliza felt her heart stop. Who? Mrs. Beatrice, your housekeeper. The world tilted. Eliza grabbed for her horse's saddle to steady herself. Mrs. Beatrice? She's inside. Insisted on waiting to speak to you both before we take her away. Watts looked uncomfortable. Your Grace, I have to warn you, she's quite calm about it, almost proud. They found Mrs. Beatrice in the blue study, sitting in a chair with her hands folded in her lap like she was waiting for a social call. Her expression was serene, almost peaceful. When Eliza entered, the housekeeper looked up and actually smiled. Your Grace, I was hoping you'd survived. It would have been such a waste if you'd burned. The casual cruelty of it stole Eliza's breath. Why? Why did I try to kill you, or why am I glad you survived? Both. Mrs. Beatrice stood, smoothing her skirts. I tried to kill you because you're destroying everything this house stands for, everything Lady Catherine built, everything I've spent 20 years maintaining. You came here with your common blood and your common ideas, and you started tearing down systems that work, disrupting order, making servants think they're equal to their betters. So you tried to burn me alive. I tried to scare you first, the note, the dead roses. I thought perhaps if you understood how unwelcome you were, you'd leave voluntarily. But you didn't scare, you just kept pushing, kept changing things, kept making yourself more entrenched. Her expression hardened. So I took more drastic measures. The torch was meant to kill you, quickly, painlessly even, if you'd breathed in enough smoke before you woke. How merciful, Eliza said flatly. I thought so. Mrs. Beatrice looked at Nathaniel. Your Grace, I hope you understand. I did this for you, for your house, for the memory of your first wife, who understood her place and kept it. This woman, she gestured at Eliza with contempt. She's poison. She'll destroy everything if you let her. So you tried to murder her. Nathaniel's voice was ice. In my house, under my roof. To save it. To save you from making a terrible mistake. Mrs. Beatrice's calm was cracking now, desperation showing through. Your Grace, surely you see. She's wrong for you, wrong for this estate, wrong for everything. Lady Catherine would never have... Don't! The word cracked like a whip. Don't you dare invoke Catherine's name to justify this. Catherine would have been horrified by what you've done. Catherine understood tradition. She understood order. She knew her place, and she kept it. And this house ran smoothly because of it. Mrs. Beatrice was shouting now, all composure gone. But this woman, this merchant's daughter, she comes here, and within weeks everything is chaos. Servants thinking they're people. Tenants demanding rights. The natural order destroyed. The natural order, Eliza repeated softly, was hurting people, was letting children bleed in the scullery and families freeze in broken cottages. If that's order, then I'm glad I destroyed it. Mrs. Beatrice's face twisted with rage. You don't understand. You never will. Because you're not one of us. You never were. You never will be. No, Eliza agreed. I'm not. Thank God for that. Constable Watts stepped forward. Mrs. Beatrice, I'm placing you under arrest for attempted murder. You'll be held until trial. The housekeeper went without resistance, her face settling back into that eerie calm. As she passed Eliza, she paused. You think you've won, but you haven't. The people who matter still see you for what you are. Common, inferior, wrong. She smiled. Even if His Grace is too besotted to admit it, everyone else knows the truth. Then she was gone, led away by Watts and two deputies who'd been waiting outside. The study fell into silence. Eliza sank into a chair, suddenly boneless with exhaustion. Her hands throbbed, her chest ached, and somewhere deep inside she felt the first cracks in the armor she'd built around herself. She's wrong, Nathaniel said quietly. About you, about everything. Is she? Eliza looked up at him. She's not the only one who thinks I don't belong. Half your servants think it. Most of society thinks it. And until tonight, you thought it too. I never thought you were inferior. You just thought I was a problem, a liability, something to be managed or removed. She stood, her legs shaking. But you were right about one thing. This marriage was a mistake, because I can't live with someone who sees me as an obligation instead of a partner. Eliza, I'm tired, Nathaniel. I'm tired of fighting for every inch of respect. Tired of proving I have a right to exist in this house. Tired of watching you struggle between what you feel and what you think you should feel. She moved toward the door. Maybe Mrs. Beatrice was right. Maybe I should leave. Don't! The word was desperate. Please don't! She turned, surprised by the raw emotion in his voice. He looked stricken, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. Why not? Give me one good reason why I should stay. Because I don't want you to go. The words came out rough. Because somewhere in the past weeks you became important to me. Because watching that torch fly through your window, knowing you were inside, knowing I might lose you, his voice broke. It terrified me in a way nothing else ever has. Fear isn't love, Nathaniel. I know, but it's a start. He moved closer, his hands reaching for hers, then stopping when he saw the blisters. Let me call the physician. Let me take care of you. I don't need taking care of. I know you don't. You're the strongest person I've ever met. But maybe... He swallowed hard. Maybe I need to do it anyway. Not because you're weak, but because you're important to me and I want to help you. Is that allowed? She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the cold Duke facade to the man beneath. Scared, lonely, trying so hard to do the right thing that he'd forgotten how to feel anything. Yes, she said softly. That's allowed. The physician came and treated her burns, clucking disapprovingly about infection and scarring. Nathaniel stayed the entire time, his presence solid and reassuring. When the physician left, Anne appeared with tea and biscuits neither of them touched. You should rest, Nathaniel said finally. You can use the Duchess's suite in the West Wing, or... He hesitated. My chambers are available if you'd feel safer not being alone. Your chambers? She raised an eyebrow. The ones with the door that's been locked since our wedding? I'll unlock it. He stood, offering his hand. If you want. She took it. Let him lead her through the corridors to his chambers, which she'd never seen. They were surprisingly spare, none of the elaborate decoration of the Duchess's suite. Just sturdy furniture and shelves of books and a massive bed that looked like it had never been slept in. You don't sleep here, she realized. Not often. I usually work until I pass out at my desk. He looked embarrassed. Catherine used to complain about it, said I was married to my work instead of to her. Was she right? Probably. He moved to the window, looking out at the darkened grounds. I didn't know how to be a husband. Still don't. My father was cold, my mother distant. I had no model for what marriage should look like except duty and obligation. And yet you loved Caroline. I thought I did, when I was young and stupid and thought love was just intense feeling. He turned to face her. But then I married Catherine, and I realized love is more complicated than that. She was kind, good, everything a wife should be, and I felt nothing, just obligation, duty, the weight of knowing I'd failed her by not being able to feel what I should. So you locked the door between us because you didn't want to fail again. I locked the door because I was terrified I'd feel the same. Nothing I felt with Catherine. Or worse, that I'd feel something and it would destroy us both when it inevitably faded. He took a breath. But I was wrong. Because what I feel for you isn't nothing. It's terrifying and uncomfortable and completely beyond my control. And tonight, when I thought I might lose you, he stopped, his jaw working. It broke something in me. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Because I'm an idiot. Because I was scared. Because admitting I feel something means accepting I could lose it. He moved closer. But I'm more scared of losing you by staying silent than by telling you the truth. And what is the truth? That you're extraordinary. That you've made this house a home instead of a museum. That you've made me feel things I didn't think I was capable of feeling. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. That I don't want to live without you. Not out of duty or obligation, but because you make me want to be better than I am. Nathaniel, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know I've been cruel and cold in everything you accuse me of. But if you'll let me try, if you'll give me the chance to be the partner you deserve, I swear I'll spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of you. She looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes, the fear that she'd reject him, the hope that she wouldn't. And she realized something important. He was just as scared as she was, just as uncertain, just as damaged by the world they lived in. I can't promise it'll be easy, she said quietly. I'm still going to make changes. Still going to push boundaries. Still going to be exactly who I am. I know. That's what I'm counting on. He reached for her hands, careful of the bandages. Eliza Voss, will you give me the chance to fall in love with you properly? Not because we're married, not because we're obligated, but because I want to? She felt something loosen in her chest, something she hadn't realized was clenched tight. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll give you that chance. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her carefully, and for the first time since arriving at Ashworth Manor, Eliza felt safe. Not because she was protected, but because she was seen, valued, wanted. Stay here tonight, he said against her hair. In my room. I'll sleep in the chair. I need to know you're safe. Or, she said, pulling back to look at him, you could sleep in the bed. With me. Just sleep. Nothing more. Not yet. He looked uncertain. Are you sure? I'm sure. She was. For the first time in weeks, she was absolutely sure of something. We've been strangers living in the same house. Maybe it's time we actually got to know each other. They lay in the darkness together, not touching, but aware of each other in a way that felt intimate without being overwhelming. And for the first time, Nathaniel talked. Really talked. About his childhood, cold and formal. About his father's expectations and his mother's distance. About Catherine and the guilt he carried for not loving her enough. About his fear that he was fundamentally broken, incapable of real connection. Eliza listened and shared her own stories. About her father's fall from grace. About her mother's desperation. About the terror of being sold like cattle and the determination to make something of herself anyway. About the loneliness of being powerful but powerless at the same time. They talked until dawn crept through the windows, and somewhere in those hours something shifted between them. The wall came down. The distance closed. And when Eliza finally fell asleep, exhausted and bandaged and aching, she did so knowing that for the first time since her wedding, she wasn't alone. She woke to find Nathaniel already dressed, standing by the window with a letter in his hand. His expression was grim. What is it? She asked, sitting up. News from London. From my solicitor. He turned to face her. There's been a development with Caroline. What kind of development? Apparently she's been spreading a story that you're mentally unstable, that the fire was an accident caused by your own carelessness, that I'm keeping you confined at Ashworth for your own safety. His jaw tightened. She's painting herself as the concerned friend trying to help, and you as the mad wife who needs to be controlled. Eliza felt cold wash over her. And people believe her? Some do. She's credible, well-liked. And you're He hesitated. An outsider with no reputation to fall back on. Yes. He crumpled the letter. But we're not going to let her win. We're going to fight back. How? A knock at the door interrupted them. Patterson entered at Nathaniel's command, his expression troubled. Your Grace, there are visitors, multiple visitors, Lord Ashford, Lady Thornbury, and several others. They're demanding to see you both. They say... He paused. They say they're here to assess Her Grace's well-being. Eliza and Nathaniel exchanged glances. Caroline's poison was working faster than they'd anticipated. Tell them we'll receive them in the drawing room in 15 minutes, Nathaniel said. And Patterson? Send for Mr. Pemberton and Constable Watts. We're going to need witnesses. He turned to Eliza. Are you ready for this? She thought about Mrs. Beatrice's words, about Caroline's veiled threats, about all the people who'd spent weeks telling her she didn't belong, and she felt something harden inside her chest. More than ready, she stood, ignoring the pain in her hands. Let's show them exactly what they're dealing with. The drawing room was crowded with concerned aristocrats, all looking grave and important. Lady Ashford sat like a queen holding court. Lord Ashford stood by the fireplace, looking uncomfortable. Lady Thornbury perched on a settee, her expression unreadable. And several others Eliza recognized from various balls and gatherings, all watching her with varying degrees of suspicion and pity. Ah, there you are. Lady Ashford's voice was cold. We were beginning to think you were avoiding us. Hardly. Nathaniel kept his voice level. Though I'm curious what brings you all to my home uninvited. Concern for your wife, naturally. We've heard disturbing reports. Lady Ashford's gaze fixed on Eliza. Reports of erratic behavior, of fires and accusations, of instability that requires management. Reports from whom? Eliza asked, though she knew the answer. Lady Caroline has been most concerned. She says you've been making wild claims about her, accusing her of terrible things without evidence. Lady Ashford's expression was sympathetic in a way that made Eliza want to scream. My dear, we understand. You've been under tremendous stress, thrust into a world you weren't prepared for. It's no wonder you're struggling. I'm not struggling. I'm surviving attempts on my life. Are you? Or are you simply seeing threats where none exist? Lord Ashford spoke up, his voice gentle. My dear Duchess, sometimes when we're overwhelmed, we imagine persecution where there's only ordinary resistance to change. There was nothing imaginary about the torch thrown through my window. An accident, surely. Perhaps a servant was careless. It was Mrs. Beatrice. Your housekeeper confessed last night. Nathaniel's voice cut through the murmuring. She's been arrested and charged with attempted murder. That got their attention. Shocked silence filled the room. Mrs. Beatrice? Lady Ashford looked genuinely surprised. That's absurd. She's been with your family for decades. And she tried to kill my wife because she couldn't accept the changes Eliza was making. Nathaniel moved to stand beside Eliza, a united front. So before you continue questioning my wife's sanity, perhaps you should question your own assumptions about who's trustworthy and who isn't. But Lady Caroline said, Lady Caroline has been trying to undermine my wife since the day we married. Nathaniel's voice was steel now. She wants Eliza gone and me available, and she's using all of you to make that happen. That's quite an accusation, Lord Ashford said stiffly. Is it? Then explain why Caroline was at my house hours before the fire, spreading poison about Eliza. Explain why she conveniently had an alibi for the exact time the attack happened. Explain why she's been in London telling everyone my wife is mad when she has no evidence beyond Eliza's refusal to be bullied into silence. Lady Thornbury spoke up for the first time. He has a point, Amelia. Caroline has been rather vocal about the new Duchess. One might even say obsessed. She's concerned. She's jealous. Lady Thornbury stood, moving to stand beside Eliza. And I, for one, am tired of watching this young woman be attacked for the crime of actually caring about people. I've watched her these past weeks, seen what she's done for the tenants, for the servants, seen her refuse to be cowed by people determined to crush her spirit. And frankly, she's shown more courage and compassion than anyone else in this room. Lady Thornbury, Lady Ashford began. Oh, save it, Amelia. You've been determined to hate her because she's not Catherine, but Catherine, bless her, was miserable. We all knew it. She faded away in this house until there was nothing left but a shell. And now here's someone with fire and life and determination, and instead of celebrating that, you're trying to destroy her because she doesn't fit your narrow idea of what a duchess should be. The room erupted in protests and arguments. Eliza stood frozen, watching as people she barely knew debated her sanity, her worth, her right to exist in the world she'd married into. Then Nathaniel's hand found hers, squeezing gently. And she realized something. She didn't need their approval, their acceptance, their validation. She had his. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Enough! She raised her voice, cutting through the noise. Everyone turned to stare. I appreciate your concern, truly, but I'm not mad, I'm not unstable. I'm simply refusing to be invisible, refusing to accept that suffering is acceptable just because it's traditional. And if that makes me unsuitable to be a duchess, then perhaps the definition of duchess needs to change. My dear girl, Lady Ashford began. I'm not your dear girl. I'm Duchess Voss. And whether you like it or not, I'm here to stay. She looked at each of them in turn. So you have a choice. You can continue listening to Caroline's poison and believing I'm the problem. Or you can actually look at what I've done, the improvements I've made, the lives I've changed, and decide for yourselves whether I'm mad or simply different. Silence. Then, incredibly, someone began to clap. It was Lady Thornbury, her applause slow and deliberate. Well said, Your Grace. Very well said indeed. One by one, others joined in. Not everyone. Lady Ashford sat rigid. Her face set in disapproving lines, and several others looked uncertain. But enough. Enough that Eliza felt something shift in the room. She'd won. Not completely, not perfectly, but enough. As the visitors began to leave, still murmuring and debating, Lady Thornberry paused beside Eliza. "You'll still have enemies," she said quietly. "Caroline won't give up easily, and there are others who resist change simply because it's change." "I know. But you'll also have allies now, people who see what you're trying to do and want to help." She smiled. "Count me among them." After everyone left, Eliza sank onto a sofa, suddenly exhausted. Nathaniel sat beside her, his arm sliding around her shoulders. "You were magnificent," he said. "I was terrified." "That's what made it magnificent." He pulled her closer. "Eliza, I'm sorry. For doubting you. For not defending you sooner. For being so blind to what Caroline was doing. You're defending me now. That's what matters. It's not enough, but it's a start." He turned to face her. "I meant what I said last night, about wanting to fall in love with you, about being partners. I know. And I meant this too. I'm going to spend every day proving I deserve you, starting now." He stood, offering his hand. "Come with me. I want to show you something." He led her through the manor to a wing she'd never explored, unlocking a door with a key from his pocket. Inside was a conservatory, glass walls and ceiling, plants everywhere, and in the center a painting easel with blank canvases stacked beside it. "This was Catherine's studio," he said quietly, "where she painted all those flowers. After she died, I locked it away. Couldn't bear to look at it because it reminded me I'd failed her." He moved to the center of the room. "But I think it's time to open it again, not as a memorial, as a workspace. For you." "For me? You said you wanted to make changes, to build something meaningful. Well, this is yours now, to use however you want. A place to plan, to work, to create." He looked at her. "A place that's entirely yours, where no one can tell you you don't belong." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. "Nathaniel, I'm not good at this," he said, his voice rough. "At showing affection or making grand gestures. But I can give you space, support, the freedom to be exactly who you are, if that's enough." She crossed to him, stood on her toes, and kissed him. Just a soft press of lips, gentle and promising and full of possibility. They stood in the conservatory together, sunlight streaming through glass, and for a moment the world outside ceased to exist. No enemies, no threats. Just two people who'd finally found their way to each other through the wreckage of everything they'd thought marriage should be. The moment shattered with Patterson's urgent knock. "Your Grace?" The butler's voice carried through the door. "Forgive the interruption, but there's news from London. Urgent news." Nathaniel pulled away reluctantly, his hand lingering on Eliza's waist. "Come in." Patterson entered with a telegram, his face pale. "It's from your solicitor, Your Grace. He says there's been an incident. Lady Caroline has accused you both of conspiracy to defame her character. She's filed suit in London, claiming damages to her reputation." Eliza felt her stomach drop. "She's suing us." "It's a strategic move," Nathaniel said grimly, scanning the telegram. "She's going on the offensive, trying to discredit us before we can expose her role in the attacks. But she has an alibi she arranged, with witnesses she controls." He crumpled the telegram. "This is exactly the kind of thing she'd do. Attack first, establish herself as the victim, make us look like the aggressors." "So what do we do?" Nathaniel looked at her, and something fierce burned in his eyes. "We fight, but not in court, not on her terms." He turned to Patterson. "Send word to Mr. Pemberton. I want a full accounting of every financial transaction Caroline has made in the past 6 months. Every property purchase, every payment, every debt. And send word to Constable Watts. I want him to dig deeper into Mrs. Beatrice's finances as well. If Caroline paid her, there will be a trail." "Your Grace," Patterson hesitated. "Lady Caroline is well connected. Investigating her openly could have consequences. Let it have consequences. I'm done protecting people who use their position to hurt others." Nathaniel's voice was steel. "Do it, now." Patterson bowed and vanished. Eliza stared at her husband, seeing him with new eyes. This was the Duke in full power, not cold and distant, but focused and dangerous in a way that made her pulse quicken. "What else?" she asked. "We go to London. Together. We face her accusations head on, in front of everyone who matters." He took her hands carefully, mindful of the bandages. "But I need to know you're ready for this. It's going to be brutal. She's going to say terrible things about you, about us, and some people will believe her." "Let them." Eliza lifted her chin. "I've survived worse than gossip." His smile was quick and genuine. "You have indeed. Then we leave tomorrow, and we end this." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Eliza worked with Anne to pack appropriate clothing for London society. The silks and jewels she'd come to associate with performance rather than comfort. Nathaniel closeted himself with his solicitor, building their case, gathering evidence. And throughout the manor, servants whispered about the coming confrontation, taking sides, placing bets on who would emerge victorious. Mary found Eliza in her chambers that evening, her young face anxious. "Your Grace, may I speak freely?" "Always." "There's talk below stairs. About Lady Caroline. About what might happen if she wins this lawsuit." Mary twisted her hands. "Some of the servants are scared. They say if you're discredited, if His Grace sends you away, things will go back to how they were before, with Mrs. Beatrice or someone like her." "Mrs. Beatrice is in prison awaiting trial." "I know, but there are others who think like her, who want things the old way." Mary's voice dropped. "Your Grace, I'm not saying this to frighten you. I'm saying it because you need to know. Some of us are ready to fight for you. To testify about what you've done, how you've changed things for the better, if it comes to that." Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. "Mary, you could lose your position. I almost lost my hands before you came. Now I'm learning to be a lady's maid, sleeping in clean quarters, eating proper food. I'd rather lose my position standing up for what's right than keep it by staying silent." The girl's jaw set stubbornly. "And I'm not alone. There are others. Thomas, Anne, even some of the older staff. You've shown us we matter. Now we want to show you the same." "Thank you," Eliza whispered. "That means more than you know." After Mary left, Nathaniel appeared in the doorway connecting their chambers. He'd unlocked it that morning, a symbolic gesture that felt monumental. Now he stood there uncertainly, as if asking permission. "Come in," Eliza said. He crossed to where she sat by the window, lowering himself into the chair beside her. For a moment they sat in comfortable silence, watching darkness claim the grounds. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about being partners, about trust. And I realize I've been approaching this all wrong. I've been trying to protect you by controlling you, keeping you safe, by keeping you contained." He looked at her. "But that's not partnership. That's just a more benevolent form of imprisonment. I appreciate you recognizing that. So, here's what I propose. When we go to London, we do it as equals. You have equal say in every decision, every strategy, every move we make." He paused. "I won't lie. It terrifies me, giving up control, trusting someone else to have that much power in my life. But I think that's the point. Real trust is terrifying." Eliza reached for his hand. "I'm scared too. Of failing. Of letting you down. Of proving everyone right who said I wasn't good enough." "You could never let me down. You're the strongest person I know." "I'm not strong. I'm just stubborn." He laughed, the sound surprising them both. "Perhaps that's the same thing." They talked late into the night, making plans, discussing strategy, learning each other's thoughts and fears in a way they'd never done before. And when exhaustion finally claimed them, they fell asleep in Nathaniel's bed together, fully clothed, hands linked between them. The journey to London took 2 days. They traveled in his finest carriage, a statement of power and position. Eliza wore deep green silk that made her look older, harder, less like the girl who'd arrived at Ashworth, and more like the woman she'd become through fire and blood and sheer determination not to break. London assaulted her senses. The noise, the crowds, the smell of coal smoke and horses, and too many people packed too close together. They stayed at the Voss London House, an elegant townhouse in Mayfair that made Ashworth Manor look modest by comparison. "How many houses do you have?" Eliza asked as servants rushed to unload their trunks. 4 main estates, 3 townhouses, and various properties I've inherited but never visit. He said it matter-of-factly, as if it were normal to own more homes than one could possibly use. The wealth can be overwhelming. It's part of why I focus so obsessively on managing it properly. If I stopped to think about the inequality, the injustice of it all, I'd go mad. Or you could use it to make things better, like we've been doing. Like you've been teaching me to do, you mean? He helped her from the carriage. Come, we have appointments to keep. The first was with his solicitor, a sharp-eyed man named Mr. Thornton, who laid out the case against them in brutal detail. Lady Caroline claims you, Your Grace, he nodded to Eliza, have been spreading false rumors about her character. She claims these rumors have damaged her reputation and marriageability. She's seeking £10,000 in damages. Eliza's breath caught. 10,000? It's an outrageous sum, Nathaniel said, which is the point. She's trying to bankrupt us or force us to settle quietly. She also has affidavits from several society ladies supporting her claims, Thornton continued. They attest to her good character and to Your Grace's, he cleared his throat uncomfortably, erratic behavior at social events. Erratic meaning I refuse to be bullied. Unfortunately, that's not how they framed it. Thornton pushed documents across his desk. However, we have some ammunition of our own. Mr. Pemberton's investigation uncovered several interesting financial transactions. Lady Caroline made a payment of £200 to Mrs. Beatrice 3 weeks before the fire attempt. Eliza leaned forward. That's the connection. She paid Mrs. Beatrice to kill me. Possibly. But Lady Caroline claims it was a loan to help Mrs. Beatrice with a family emergency. She has documentation to that effect. Forged documentation, obviously. Proving that will be difficult. Thornton looked apologetic. She's been very careful. Every move documented, every alibi solid. She's playing a long game. Then we play longer, Nathaniel said. What else? Mrs. Beatrice is willing to testify. In exchange for a reduced sentence, she'll admit that Lady Caroline suggested the idea of removing Your Grace from Ashworth. She can't prove direct conspiracy, but she can establish that Caroline planted the seed. That's something. It's not enough to convict her of attempted murder, but it might be enough to destroy her reputation. Thornton steepled his fingers. The question is whether you're willing to go that far. Once this becomes public, it will be scandalous. Both of you will be dragged through the mud. Every detail of your marriage, your backgrounds, your private lives, all of it will be fodder for gossip. Eliza looked at Nathaniel, saw the same determination she felt reflected in his eyes. We're willing, she said. We end this, whatever it takes. The trial, or rather, the hearing as it was more properly called, took place 3 days later in a formal chamber packed with aristocrats who'd come to watch the spectacle. Lady Caroline sat with her solicitor, looking beautiful and wounded in lavender silk. Her supporters clustered around her like a protective wall. Eliza and Nathaniel sat across the room, isolated except for Lady Thornbury, who'd traveled to London specifically to stand with them. Ignore the stares, the older woman whispered. They're waiting to see if you'll break. I won't, Eliza said, and meant it. The magistrate, Lord Hawthorne, an elderly man with shrewd eyes, called the hearing to order. Caroline's solicitor went first, painting a picture of a delicate lady grievously wounded by vicious rumors spread by a jealous, unstable Duchess. Lady Caroline has been a pillar of society for years, the solicitor intoned. Blameless in conduct, gracious in manner, beloved by all who know her. And then the Duke of Voss remarries to a woman of questionable background and no social standing. And suddenly Lady Caroline finds herself the target of baseless accusations, accused of conspiracy, of attempted murder, of schemes so outlandish no reasonable person could credit them, all because the new Duchess cannot accept that she is unwelcome in a world she was never born to inhabit. The words stung because they were partially true. Eliza wasn't born to this world. She had made enemies, and some of her accusations against Caroline couldn't be fully proven. But then Mr. Thornton stood, and his voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. Lady Caroline would have this court believe she is a victim, an innocent woman maligned by a jealous rival, but evidence suggests otherwise. He pulled out documents. 3 weeks before an attempt was made on the Duchess of Voss's life, Lady Caroline made a payment of £200 to Mrs. Beatrice Harwood, the housekeeper who has since confessed to attempted murder. Lady Caroline claims this was a loan for a family emergency. Yet investigation reveals Mrs. Harwood has no family. None living, at least. So why the payment? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Caroline's face remained serene, but her hands tightened in her lap. Furthermore, Thornton continued, we have testimony from multiple servants at Ashworth Manor who witnessed Lady Caroline making disparaging comments about the Duchess. Comments that went beyond mere social criticism into active encouragement of discontent among staff. She suggested repeatedly that life would be better for everyone if the Duchess were removed from the estate. Suggesting is not the same as ordering, Caroline's solicitor objected. No, but it establishes pattern and motive. Thornton turned to the magistrate. My lord, we request permission to call Mrs. Harwood to testify. Lord Hawthorne considered, then nodded. Granted, Mrs. Beatrice was brought in under guard, looking thinner and paler than Eliza remembered. She took the stand with her head high, defiant even in chains. Mrs. Harwood, Thornton began, you have confessed to attempting to murder the Duchess of Voss. Why? Because she was destroying everything I'd built, everything Lady Catherine had established, everything proper. The housekeeper's voice was steady. She didn't belong. She needed to be removed. And Lady Caroline, did she share this view? Silence. Mrs. Beatrice's eyes flicked to Caroline, who sat motionless. Mrs. Harwood, you've been offered a reduced sentence in exchange for truthful testimony. I'll ask again. What role did Lady Caroline play in your decision? She suggested it might be best if the Duchess left. Said she was ruining His Grace's life. Said everyone would be happier if she were gone. Mrs. Beatrice's voice dropped. She never said to kill her, not in those words, but she made it clear that if something were to happen, if the Duchess were to depart, it would solve many problems. The chamber erupted. Caroline shot to her feet, her composure finally cracking. That's a lie. I would never suggest such a thing. Order! Lord Hawthorne's gavel cracked. Lady Caroline, sit down. She's lying to save herself. Can't you see that? Caroline's beautiful face twisted with desperation. This woman tried to murder someone, and now she's trying to drag me down with her. Lady Caroline. The magistrate's voice was ice. Sit down! Caroline sank back into her chair, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen her lose control, seen the mask slip. Thornton pressed his advantage. Mrs. Harwood, the £200 Lady Caroline paid you, what was it for? She said it was for my loyalty, for keeping quiet about her visits to Ashworth, about the things she said regarding the Duchess. Mrs. Beatrice looked at Caroline with something like contempt. I thought she was my ally, that she understood the need to preserve tradition. I didn't realize she was just using me. You're lying! Caroline was on her feet again. All of you are lying. You're conspiring against me because you can't stand that I'm telling the truth about her. She pointed at Eliza. She's common. She doesn't belong. And you all know it, but you're too cowardly to say it. The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to Eliza. This was it. The moment. She could sit quietly and let the lawyers handle it, or she could stand up and fight for herself. She stood. You're right, she said clearly. I am common. I wasn't born into this world. I don't have generations of noble blood. I married a duke because my father was desperate, and your precious Nathaniel needed a debt paid. She moved forward, closer to Caroline. But you know what else is common? Trying to murder someone because you want what they have. Paying people to commit crimes you're too cowardly to do yourself. Destroying another woman because a man chose her over you. I never... Yes, you did. Eliza's voice was steel now. You've been trying to get rid of me since the day Nathaniel married me. You spread rumors. You poisoned people against me. You paid Mrs. Beatrice to make my life hell, and when that didn't work, you encouraged her to kill me. You did everything you could think of to remove me from your path. And why? Because you love Nathaniel? She laughed bitterly. No, because you want what he represents, the title, the power, the position. You don't care about him as a person. You never did. Caroline's face had gone white. You don't know anything about... I know you had him once and you threw him away when a better offer came along. I know you married Lord Winters for his money and spent years bored in that marriage waiting for him to die. I know you saw Nathaniel's grief after Catherine died and thought it was your chance to swoop in and reclaim what you gave up. Eliza stepped closer. But he chose me. Not because I'm better than you. Not because I'm more beautiful or more refined, but because I actually see him as a person instead of a prize to be won. How dare you? How dare I tell the truth? Eliza's voice rang through the chamber. You want to sue me for damaging your reputation? Fine, except I haven't damaged anything. You did that yourself, by being so consumed with jealousy that you convinced yourself attempted murder was acceptable as long as it gave you what you wanted. Carolyn lunged. It was so unexpected that for a moment no one reacted. She came at Eliza with hands outstretched like claws, her face contorted with rage, all pretense of gentility abandoned. Eliza stumbled back, her heel catching on her dress, and fell. Caroline landed on top of her, fingernails raking across Eliza's face, drawing blood. Eliza gasped and shoved, but Caroline was strong with fury, her hands finding Eliza's throat. Then Nathaniel was there, pulling Caroline off with brutal efficiency, throwing her bodily away from his wife. Guards rushed in, grabbing Caroline as she screamed and fought like something feral. She attacked me. You all saw it. She provoked me. Caroline's voice was shrill, desperate. This is all her fault. Everything is her fault. Lord Hawthorne stood, his face grave. Lady Caroline Winters, you are hereby found guilty of assault in this chamber. Furthermore, based on the testimony and evidence presented, I am referring your case to the Crown for investigation into conspiracy to commit murder. His gavel fell. Take her away. They dragged Caroline out, still screaming, still insisting she was the victim, still refusing to accept that she'd destroyed herself. The chamber erupted into chaos, people rushing forward with questions, with support, with morbid curiosity. But Eliza barely heard any of it. She sat on the floor where she'd fallen, Nathaniel kneeling beside her, his hands gentle on her face as he examined the scratches Caroline had left. Are you all right? I think so. Her voice shook. Is it over? It's over. He pulled her close, not caring about propriety or who was watching. You were magnificent, terrifying and magnificent. I was scared. I know. That's what made it so powerful. He helped her to her feet, keeping an arm around her waist. Come, let's get you home. But as they moved toward the exit, people blocked their path. Not to harm, to congratulate, to apologize, to admit they'd been wrong. Your Grace, an elderly Duchess said, tears in her eyes. I misjudged you terribly. Please forgive me. Your Grace, a young lord offered, if there's anything I can do to make amends for my support of Lady Caroline, Your Grace, again and again, voices overlapping, hands reaching out, people seeing her for the first time as something other than an interloper. Lady Thornberry appeared beside them, her smile triumphant. I told you, you just needed to show them who you really are. They made it back to the townhouse in a daze. Servants rushed to attend them, but Nathaniel waved them away, pulling Eliza into a private parlor and closing the door behind them. For a long moment they just stood there, breathing, letting the adrenaline fade. Then Nathaniel laughed, actually laughed, the sound breaking free like something that had been trapped too long. What? Eliza asked. I was just thinking. My first wife painted flowers. My second wife takes down aristocratic conspiracies in public court. I have terrible luck with marriage. She hit him, but she was laughing too. Terrible luck indeed. He caught her hand, his expression sobering. Eliza, I need to say something. Now? After everything that just happened? Especially now. Because I almost lost you today. And I realized something while watching Caroline attack you. He took a breath. I love you. The words hung in the air between them. You love me? I do. I know it's soon. I know I haven't earned it yet. But watching you stand up there and fight for yourself, for us, for everything you believe in, I knew. I love you. Not because you're my wife, not because I'm supposed to, but because you're extraordinary and fierce, and you make me want to be better than I am. Eliza felt tears spill over. Nathaniel, you don't have to say it back. I know we're still learning each other. I just needed you to know. He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away tears. Whatever comes next, we face it together. As partners. As equals. As people who love each other, she said. Because I love you too. Somewhere between the arguments and the fires and the attempted murder, I fell in love with you. And I don't know when it happened, but it did. He kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of everything they'd both been too afraid to feel before. And Eliza kissed him back, pouring months of loneliness and fear and hard-won strength into the contact. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. "Take me home," Eliza whispered. "Our home. I want to go back to Ashworth." "Are you sure? We could stay in London. Enjoy the social season now that you're vindicated." "I don't care about the social season. I care about the estate. About the people there who stood by me. About the work we've started." She looked at him. "About building something real instead of just performing for people who will never really accept me anyway." His smile was soft. "Then home it is." They left London the next morning before society could trap them in obligations and expectations. The journey back felt different, lighter somehow, as if they'd left weight behind in that courtroom along with Caroline's schemes and Mrs. Beatrice's contempt. They arrived at Ashworth as the sun was setting, painting the manor in shades of gold and amber, and there, lined up on the steps to greet them, were the servants. All of them. Patterson in front, his usually stern face showing something that might have been approval. Anne beside him, tears streaming down her face. Mary, Thomas, even the stable boys who'd never spoken to Eliza directly. "Welcome home, Your Grace," Patterson said as Eliza climbed down from the carriage. "Both of you." It was the first time he'd acknowledged her as an equal to Nathaniel. The first time he'd called this her home without reservation. Eliza felt her throat tighten. "It's good to be back." They entered the manor together, and somehow it felt different now. Less like a prison, less like a museum. More like a home that was still being built, still being defined by the people who lived there. Over the following weeks, things changed. Not dramatically, revolution came slowly to places like Ashworth, but steadily. New servants were hired to replace Mrs. Beatrice and those who'd resigned in protest of Eliza's reforms. The Warwick family moved back into their rebuilt cottage, larger and sturdier than before. Thomas Blackwood completed his restitution and shook Eliza's hand with genuine respect. "You were right," he said. "I didn't understand. But I do now." "Do you?" "You didn't want to destroy our way of life. You wanted to make it better. For everyone, not just those at the top." He looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. For what I did. For not seeing sooner." "You see now. That's what matters." Jacob Blackwood came to the manor a week later, hat in hand, asking if Eliza would consider implementing some of her agricultural reforms on his land as well. "Heard from the Warwicks that you've been using some new crop rotation methods. Increase their yield by 20%. He looked reluctant but determined. "I figure if it works for them, might work for us too. If you're willing to help." Eliza was willing. Very willing. Social invitations started arriving again, but this time they were different. Not obligations, but actual requests for her presence, her advice, her participation. Lady Thornbury wrote asking if Eliza would help her establish similar reforms on her own estates. Other aristocratic women began visiting, curious about what she'd accomplished, wanting to learn. "You're becoming fashionable," Nathaniel teased one morning, watching her sort through yet another pile of correspondence. Horrifying thought. "Isn't it what you wanted, to be accepted?" "No. I wanted to make a difference. Acceptance is just a convenient side effect." She set down the letters. "Speaking of which, I've been thinking about the East Wing." "What about it?" "It's still housing servants in cramped, dark rooms. I want to renovate. Proper windows, better heating, decent beds." She waited for his objection. Instead, he nodded. "Do it. I'll allocate funds." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "I told you, we're partners. Your vision, my resources. Together we can actually change things. We already are changing things. We're just getting started." They were. Over the following months, the changes rippled outward. Better conditions for servants, fair wages, education opportunities for tenant children, medical care for those who couldn't afford it. Nothing revolutionary. Nothing that would topple the class system overnight, but enough to make life tangibly better for people who'd never had anyone fight for them before. And slowly, Grudgingly, other estates began to follow suit, because Ashworth's productivity increased, because their servants stayed loyal instead of seeking employment elsewhere, because their tenants prospered and paid their rents on time and spoke well of the Duke and Duchess who actually cared about their welfare. Economics, Nathaniel explained to other aristocrats who came asking how he'd achieved such results. Treat people well and they work harder. It's not complicated. It's just basic human decency made profitable. But Eliza knew it was more than that. It was a shift in how power could be used, not to dominate, but to uplift, not to maintain rigid hierarchies, but to create systems that actually worked for everyone. 1 year after their wedding, they held a celebration at Ashworth. Not a formal ball, something simpler. A garden party open to everyone on the estate. Servants, tenants, local villagers. All welcome, all equals for one afternoon. Eliza stood on the terrace watching people mingle. Lady Thornberry chatting with Mary, now promoted to head housemaid. Jacob Blackwood comparing crop notes with Mr. Pemberton. Anne showing off her new position as Eliza's personal secretary to anyone who'd listen. Happy? Nathaniel asked, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. Complicated question. Why? Because a year ago I thought happiness meant being accepted, being part of this world. She took the wine, sipped it. Now I realize happiness isn't about fitting into someone else's system. It's about building your own. One that makes sense. One that works for everyone, not just the people at the top. Very philosophical, Your Grace. I learned from the best. She smiled at him. You've changed too, you know. Have I? You smile now. Laugh. Actually enjoy life instead of just managing it. I had a good teacher. He set down his wine glass and pulled her close. Eliza Voss, marrying you was the best mistake I ever made. Best mistake? Well, I didn't exactly choose it initially. Your father's debts and all that. His eyes crinkled with amusement. But if I could go back knowing everything that would happen, the fires, the attacks, the courtroom drama, I'd still marry you. In a heartbeat. Even knowing I'd turn your orderly world upside down, especially knowing that. He kissed her forehead. My world needed upending. They stood together watching the party, watching the world they'd built together, and Eliza felt something settle in her chest. Not happiness exactly. That was too simple a word. More like contentment mixed with purpose. The sense that she was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she was meant to do. There's something I need to tell you, she said. Oh? The physician confirmed it this morning. I'm pregnant. Nathaniel went very still. Pregnant. Yes. About 3 months along, he thinks. The baby should arrive in spring. We're going to have a child. He said it like he was testing the words, seeing how they felt. A son or daughter. Are you happy about it? She couldn't quite read his expression. I'm terrified. Absolutely terrified. He pulled her closer. And yes, happy. So happy I can't quite put it into words. Our child. Yours and mine. The merchant's daughter and the cold duke. What a combination. The strongest woman I know and the man she made better. I think that's a fine combination. He placed his hand over her still flat stomach. And this child, boy or girl, doesn't matter, will grow up knowing they're loved, knowing they matter, knowing they have the power to change things if they're brave enough to try. Like their mother? Exactly like their mother. Eliza leaned into him, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, and thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Terrified. Alone. Convinced she'd been sold into a prison with no hope of escape. She'd been wrong. She hadn't been sold into a prison. She'd been given an opportunity. Not to be saved or rescued, but to save herself. To build something meaningful from nothing. To prove that power didn't have to corrupt, that change was possible, that even in the most rigid systems, one person with courage and conviction could make a difference. I love you, she said softly. I love you too. Nathaniel's arms tightened around her. My fierce, brilliant, impossible wife. Impossible? In the best way. He turned her to face him. Eliza, I know we still have fights ahead, that we'll disagree and argue and drive each other mad, that changing this world is going to be slow and frustrating and sometimes feel impossible. But I want you to know, I'm with you, all of it. Every battle, every setback, every small victory. We do this together. Together, she agreed. And as the sun set over Ashworth Manor, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold, Eliza understood something fundamental. She hadn't survived this world by adapting to it. She'd survived by refusing to adapt, by staying true to who she was, even when everyone insisted she should be someone else, by building her own definition of power instead of accepting someone else's. She wasn't the Duchess they'd expected. She was better, and they'd just have to learn to live with that. The party continued into the evening, lanterns lit, music playing, people dancing on the lawn without regard for social hierarchy or proper behavior. It was messy and chaotic and completely improper by every standard Eliza had been taught. It was perfect. "Come," Nathaniel said, pulling her toward the dancers. "Dance with me." "Here? In front of everyone?" "Especially in front of everyone. Let them see that the Duke and Duchess of Voss are partners, equals, people who actually love each other instead of just performing duty." So they danced, there on the lawn under the stars, surrounded by servants and tenants and the people who'd become their family. And as Eliza spun in her husband's arms, she felt something she'd never expected to feel at Ashworth Manor. She felt home. Not the home she'd been born into or the home she'd been sold into, but the home she'd built with her own hands, her own courage, her own refusal to accept that some people mattered more than others simply because of the circumstances of their birth. "What are you thinking?" Nathaniel asked. "That a year ago I stood in that ballroom watching you dance with Caroline and thought my life was over. And now? Now I think it's just beginning." She smiled up at him. "We're going to change the world, Nathaniel. Maybe not all of it, maybe not quickly, but we're going to make it better. One estate at a time, one person at a time. Until people forget there was ever a time when servants bled in sculleries and no one cared. That's a tall order. Good thing we have time." She rested her head against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. "A lifetime, actually. Maybe more if we do this right." "We'll do it right. Together." "Together," she echoed. And in that moment, under the stars, surrounded by people who'd learned to see her not as an interloper, but as someone worth following, Eliza Voss, the merchant's daughter, who'd become a duchess, the purchased bride who'd become a force of nature, understood the truth. She hadn't married into power. She'd become it. On her own terms. In her own way. And nothing, not gossip, not attempted murder, not the rigid hierarchies of a society that wanted her to fail, had been able to stop her. The music played on. The dancers spun. And Ashworth Manor, once a cold monument to tradition and control, transformed into something warmer, something alive, something that might just change the world. One day at a time, one decision at a time, one act of courage at a time.